Welcome back, where we dive deep into gaming's greatest stories. Tonight, we embark on our most ambitious journey yet, a complete exploration of Dark Souls 3's intricate tapestry of lore, designed to guide you gently into slumber while unraveling one of gaming's most profound narratives. Over the next several hours, we'll traverse the fading world of Lothric, witness the desperate final attempts to link the fire, and discover why this third installment represents both an ending and a beginning in the Dark Souls saga. So settle in, get comfortable, and let's begin this epic descent into a world where gods have abandoned their thrones, kingdoms crumble to ash, and the very concept of time itself begins to unravel. Chapter 1. The Fading of the Fire. In the twilight hours of the Age of Fire, when the first flame flickers like a dying candle in an endless storm, the world of Dark Souls 3 presents us with perhaps the most melancholic and beautiful vision in the entire series. This is not the vibrant realm of Lothric we once knew, nor even the decaying majesty of Drangar Lake. This is a world in its death throes, where time itself has become unstuck, and the very foundations of reality bend and warp under the weight of accumulated ages. The opening moments of Dark Souls 3 paint a picture of cosmic exhaustion. The bell tolls, not in celebration or warning, but as a funeral dirge for a dying age. The Lords of Cinder, those mighty beings who once sacrificed themselves to kindle the first flame, have abandoned their duty. Their empty thrones stand as monuments to abdication, each one telling a story of power relinquished and responsibility cast aside. This abdication is not born of cowardice or malice, but of a deeper understanding that comes only with repetition. These Lords of Cinder have performed their cosmic duty before. They have felt their flesh burn away in service to the flame. They have experienced the agony of becoming fuel for a fire that demands ever more sacrifice to maintain its light. And now, called upon once again to repeat this ultimate sacrifice, they have simply walked away. The Abyss Watchers, once noble knights, dedicated to preventing the spread of darkness, now fight an eternal battle amongst themselves in the depths of Farron Keep. Their dedication to their cause has become a curse, an endless cycle of death and resurrection as they battle not external threats, but the very corruption they sought to prevent, now manifested within their own ranks. Aldrich, Saint of the Deep, has transformed from a righteous cleric into something horrifying, a writhing mass of sludge and teeth that devours gods themselves. His corruption represents not a fall from grace, but an evolution born of consuming the faithful who sought his blessing. In his twisted form, we see what happens when spiritual authority becomes literally parasitic, feeding on the very souls it claims to save. The giant Lord Yorm stands alone in his empty throne room, a massive figure dwarfed by the weight of his own despair. Once a king who linked the fire to save his people, he awakened to find his kingdom reduced to ash, his subjects transformed into the very creatures he had fought to save them from. His story is one of good intentions, leading to devastating consequences, of sacrifice that saves no one and protects nothing. And then there is Lothric, the young prince who was bred specifically for the purpose of linking the fire. Born with the power and bloodline necessary to serve as perfect kindling, he has made the radical choice to simply refuse. His rejection of his cosmic destiny is perhaps the most human response to divine expectation in the entire series, the simple, quiet no that reverberates across the heavens. Each of these Lords of Cinder represents a different response to the crushing weight of cosmic responsibility. Some have been driven mad by their duty, others corrupted by it, and still others have simply abandoned it entirely. Their stories collectively paint a picture of a system that has finally broken down, not through external assault, but through the accumulated exhaustion of those expected to maintain it. The world itself reflects this cosmic fatigue. Kingdoms rise and fall in the span of moments as time becomes increasingly unstable. Ancient cities from different eras exist simultaneously, layered upon each other like geological strata. Warriors from distant ages fight alongside contemporary knights, their timelines bleeding together as the fundamental structure of causality begins to collapse. This temporal instability is more than just a gameplay mechanic or narrative convenience. It represents the world's desperate attempt to maintain continuity in the face of an increasingly untenable situation. As the fire fades, the barriers between past and present weaken, allowing echoes of previous ages to manifest alongside current events. The result is a reality that becomes increasingly dreamlike, where the distinction between memory and immediate experience grows thin. The landscape itself bears the scars of countless attempts to maintain the dying flame. Entire kingdoms have been reduced to ash by the very fire they sought to kindle. The cemetery of ash, where our journey begins, is not just a graveyard but a monument to the countless civilizations that have fed themselves to the flame in service of an ideal that may have always been doomed to fail. Yet, within this apocalyptic setting, there remains a strange beauty. The dying light casts everything in hues of amber and gold, transforming even the most desolate ruins into something resembling art. There is a melancholic grace to the way ancient structures crumble, a dignity in the way forgotten knights maintain their eternal vigils, even as their bodies decay around them. This aesthetic of beautiful decay permeates every aspect of Dark Souls 3's world. It is a game that finds poetry in endings, that discovers meaning in the space between what was and what might be. The fading of the fire is not presented as a simple catastrophe to be prevented, but as a natural transition that has been artificially prolonged far beyond its intended duration. The inhabitants of this dying world reflect its exhausted state. NPCs speak with a weariness that goes beyond physical fatigue. They carry the weight of ages, the knowledge that they are participating in a cosmic drama that has played out countless times before, and will likely play out countless times again. Their dialogue is heavy with resignation, punctuated by moments of desperate hope that feel all the more poignant for their likely futility. Even the enemies we face seem less like malevolent forces and more like the natural expressions of a world returning to its primordial state. The hollow soldiers that shamble through ruined courtyards are not evil, but empty shells of what they once were, continuing to perform the motions of life long after life itself has departed. They are humanity reduced to its most basic elements, stripped of purpose and meaning, but still clinging to the patterns that once defined them. The bosses we encounter are similarly tragic figures. They are not conquering warlords or cosmic evils, but beings trapped by their own power and purpose. Each boss fight feels less like a battle between good and evil, and more like a mercy killing, a release for creatures who have been locked in patterns of behavior that no longer serve any meaningful purpose. This theme of release pervades the entire game. We are not saving the world in any traditional sense, but rather helping it to finally let go. Whether we choose to link the fire once more or allow it to fade into darkness, we are participating in a process of ending that has been postponed for far too long. The architecture of Dark Souls 3 tells its own story of decline and abandonment. Grand cathedrals stand empty, their massive spaces designed to accommodate congregations that no longer exist. Royal chambers echo with the absence of courts that have long since dispersed. Even the most impressive structures feel hollow, as if the purpose that once animated them has departed, leaving behind only empty shells. Yet these spaces retain a kind of sacred quality. They are monuments to human aspiration, testament to the heights that mortal beings can achieve when inspired by divine purpose. Their emptiness does not diminish their grandeur, but rather emphasizes it, creating a sense of loss that is both personal and cosmic in scope. The lighting in these spaces reinforces this theme of fading glory. Sunlight filters through broken windows, creating patterns of light and shadow that shift and change as clouds pass overhead. Torches flicker in the darkness, their flames seeming small and vulnerable against the vast spaces they attempt to illuminate. Even magical light sources seem dimmer than they should be, as if the very concept of illumination is gradually losing its power in this dying world. The sounds of Dark Souls 3 contribute to its atmosphere of melancholic beauty. The music swells with a grandeur that feels both triumphant and mournful, as if celebrating achievements that are already fading into memory. The ambient sounds of the world wind through ruins, the distant clang of weapons. The soft footsteps of unseen figures create a sense of a living world that is slowly becoming a mausoleum. Even the combat feels different in Dark Souls 3. There is a weight to every movement, a sense that each action carries the accumulated momentum of all the actions that have come before. Weapons feel heavier, not just in terms of game mechanics, but in terms of narrative significance. Each sword stroke, each spell cast, each dodge roll executed feels like it is carving away at the last remnants of a dying age. The magic system in particular reflects the world's declining state. Spells that once blazed with divine authority now flicker weakly, requiring greater investment to achieve diminishing returns. Miracles feel more like desperate prayers than confident invocations of divine power. Sorceries operate with the precision of mathematics, but lack the raw force they once commanded. Even pyromancy, perhaps the most primal of magical arts, seems to burn less brightly than it once did. This gradual weakening of magical power serves as a metaphor for the larger themes of the game. Just as the fire itself grows dim despite all efforts to maintain it, so too do the tools and techniques that once seemed so reliable and powerful. The world is not just ending, but is slowly losing the ability to prevent its own ending. The character progression system reinforces this theme of diminishing returns. Leveling up becomes increasingly expensive, requiring ever greater investments for smaller improvements. Equipment upgrades demand rarer materials, and even the most powerful items feel somehow insufficient to the task at hand. The player character grows stronger, but the challenges grow stronger still, maintaining a balance that emphasizes struggle over mastery. This is not to say that Dark Souls 3 is a game without hope. Rather, it is a game that finds hope in unexpected places, in the beauty of decay, in the dignity of those who continue to fight despite knowing the futility of their cause, in the possibility that endings might also be beginnings in disguise. The hope it offers is not the bright confidence of traditional heroic narratives, but the quiet acceptance that comes with understanding the true nature of cycles and change. The relationships between characters in Dark Souls 3 reflect this mature understanding of hope and futility. NPCs form connections with each other and with the player character, but these relationships are tinged with the knowledge that they are temporary. There is a preciousness to these bonds, precisely because they exist in the face of inevitable loss, a poignancy that comes from the understanding that meaning can be found even in transient experiences. As we progress through this dying world, we begin to understand that the fading of the fire is not just an external event, but an internal one. As well, the characters we encounter, the challenges we face, and the choices we make all reflect different aspects of this cosmic transition. We are not just observing the end of an age, but participating in it, helping to shape what that ending will mean and what, if anything, might come after. The genius of Dark Souls 3 lies in its ability to make this ending feel both inevitable and meaningful. It does not try to convince us that the Age of Fire can or should be saved, but rather asks us to consider what we value in the process of letting go. Do we cling to familiar patterns, even when they no longer serve? Do we rage against the dying of the light, or do we find ways to make that dying itself into something beautiful? These questions become more pressing as we delve deeper into the world and begin to understand the full scope of what is at stake. The fading of the fire is not just the end of one age, but potentially the end of the cycle of ages itself. We are witnessing not just a transition, but possibly the final transition, the moment when the cosmic wheel stops turning and something entirely new must take its place. Chapter 2, The Ashen One, awakens. From the cemetery of ash rises a figure unlike any hero who has come before, not chosen by prophecy, not blessed by gods, not even truly alive in any conventional sense. The Ashen One represents something new in the mythology of Dark Souls. They are the unkindled, those who attempted to link the fire but failed, whose bodies were consumed but whose task remained incomplete. Now, in the dying hours of the age, they stir from ash-strewn graves to attempt once more what they could not achieve in life. The nature of the Ashen One speaks to the desperation of the current age. When the true heroes have abandoned their posts and the natural order has broken down, what remains but to reanimate the failed attempts of the past? The Ashen One is not a chosen one in any traditional sense, but rather a last resort, the cosmic equivalent of scraping the bottom of the barrel to find anyone, anything, willing to take on an impossible task. Yet there is something profound in this failure made manifest. The Ashen One represents the possibility of redemption, not through perfection, but through persistence. They have already failed once at the most important task imaginable, and now they rise to try again. This is not the story of a destined hero succeeding against all odds, but of a failed hero learning from their mistakes and finding new strength in their weakness. The cemetery of Ash, where the Ashen One awakens, is itself a monument to failure and persistence. Here lie the remains of countless others who attempted to link the fire and fell short. Their graves serve as reminders that the path ahead is one that has claimed many before, but also that the attempt itself has value, regardless of the outcome. In rising from this place of failure, the Ashen One acknowledges both their connection to these previous attempts and their determination to surpass them. The process of awakening is gradual and disorienting. The Ashen One stirs from what might have been eternal rest, their consciousness slowly reassembling itself from scattered fragments. They retain some knowledge of their purpose, but lack the certainty that once drove them. This uncertainty becomes a source of strength rather than weakness, allowing them to approach familiar challenges with fresh perspective. The first enemies encountered in the Cemetery of Ash are themselves echoes of failure, hollow soldiers who once served great purposes, but now wander aimlessly through ruins that no longer hold meaning for them. Fighting these degraded warriors serves as both tutorial and prophecy, showing the Ashen One what awaits all who linger too long in a dying world, while also demonstrating that even the fallen can be overcome with patience and skill. Iudex Gundyr stands as the first true test of the Ashen One's resolve. This massive warrior serves as both guardian and judge, determining whether the newly risen hero possesses the strength necessary for the trials ahead. But Gundyr himself is a figure of tragic irony, a champion who arrived too late to fulfill his own destiny, now serving as gatekeeper for others who attempt the path he was denied. The battle with Gundyr reveals much about the nature of the Ashen One's power. They fight not with the overwhelming strength of legendary heroes, but with a more subtle and adaptable form of combat. Their movements are economical rather than spectacular, their victories earned through patience and observation rather than raw might. This fighting style reflects their nature as one who has learned from failure rather than one who has never known defeat. The coiled sword that Gundyr guards serves as the Ashen One's first connection to the greater cosmic drama they are entering. This weapon is not just a tool, but a key, capable of activating bonfires and serving as a focal point for the strange magic that allows fast travel between distant locations. In claiming this sword, the Ashen One accepts both the power and the responsibility that comes with being an agent of cosmic change. The journey from the Cemetery of Ash to Firelink Shrine marks the Ashen One's first real choice in their new existence. They could presumably remain in the graveyard, accepting their failure and resting among their fellow unsuccessful heroes. Instead, they choose to press forward, driven by a purpose that may not be entirely clear, but which nonetheless compels action. Firelink Shrine appears before the Ashen One, like a vision from a half-remembered dream. This is not the Firelink Shrine of previous games, but a new iteration that serves similar functions while carrying its own unique atmosphere of faded grandeur. The shrine exists somewhat outside of normal space and time, serving as a neutral ground where various factions and individuals can coexist despite their conflicting goals. The Firekeeper, who tends the bonfire at Firelink Shrine, represents a new generation of these mysterious figures. Unlike her predecessors, who often seem to accept their role with resignation or even enthusiasm, this Firekeeper carries an air of melancholy that suggests deep understanding of the true nature of her duties. She tends a fire that grows ever dimmer, serving heroes who become ever more desperate, all while maintaining the grace and dignity that her position demands. The relationship between the Ashen One and the Firekeeper develops gradually throughout the game, evolving from simple transactional interactions to something approaching genuine connection. She sees in the Ashen One not just another would-be hero, but someone who shares her understanding of the weight of cosmic responsibility. Their conversations become increasingly philosophical as the journey progresses, touching on questions of duty, choice, and the nature of endings. The empty thrones that dominate Firelink Shrine serve as constant reminders of the task ahead. Each throne represents not just a Lord of Cinder who must be returned, but a different aspect of the cosmic order that has broken down. The Watcher's throne speaks to the failure of vigilance, Aldrich's to the corruption of faith, Yorm's to the loneliness of leadership, and Lothric's to the burden of expectation. Together, they form a gallery of different ways that power and responsibility can become unbearable. The other inhabitants of Firelink Shrine provide the Ashen One with their first glimpse into the complex social dynamics of this dying world. Each character represents a different response to the cosmic crisis, from the merchant's pragmatic acceptance to the knight's doomed nobility to the sorcerer's scholarly detachment. Their stories interweave with the main narrative to create a tapestry of human responses to impossible circumstances. Andre the Blacksmith serves as a particularly important figure in the Ashen One's development. His presence at Firelink Shrine creates a connection to previous ages, while his dedication to his craft demonstrates the value of maintaining purpose, even in the face of cosmic uncertainty. Through his services, the Ashen One learns that preparation and improvement are possible, even in a world where ultimate success remains uncertain. The weapon upgrades that Andre provides serve both mechanical and thematic functions. As the Ashen One strengthens their equipment, they also strengthen their resolve and their connection to the world they are fighting to preserve or transform. Each improvement represents not just increased combat effectiveness, but growing investment in the outcome of their quest. The concept of the Champion's Gravetender adds another layer to the Ashen One's understanding of their role. They are not just fighting for the present, but serving as guardian of those who have fallen in previous attempts. This responsibility to the dead becomes as important as any duty to the living, creating a sense of obligation that transcends simple heroism. The mechanic of Ember in Dark Souls 3 reflects the Ashen One's unique relationship with fire and humanity. Unlike previous protagonists, who are hollow beings seeking to restore their human form, the Ashen One exists in a state between life and death, capable of being kindled into greater power through contact with the essence of other fires. This ability speaks to their nature as a being specifically designed for interaction with the cosmic forces that govern existence. When embered, the Ashen One gains not just increased health and the ability to summon assistance, but also becomes vulnerable to invasion by other players. This mechanic creates a constant tension between power and vulnerability, reflecting the broader theme that great strength always comes with great risk. The Ashen One must choose when to accept this risk and when to remain in their safer but less powerful state. The dreams and visions that occasionally visit the Ashen One during their rest provide glimpses into the deeper mysteries of their world. These experiences are not random, but seem to be connected to their unique nature as one who has already passed through death and returned. They see echoes of previous cycles, shadows of possible futures, and sometimes direct communications from entities that exist beyond normal space and time. The progression system available to the Ashen One reflects their malleable nature as a being reborn from ash. Unlike heroes bound by their original nature or training, the Ashen One can develop in any direction, mastering any skill or discipline that their experience allows. This flexibility becomes crucial as they encounter challenges that demand different approaches and solutions. The Covenant system in Dark Souls 3 offers the Ashen One various forms of allegiance and purpose beyond their main quest. Each covenant represents a different philosophy about how to approach the cosmic crisis, from the Warrior of Sunlight's dedication to cooperation, to the Aldrich Faithful's embrace of consumption. The Ashen One's choices in these allegiances reveal much about their developing character and values. The online aspects of Dark Souls 3 create a unique sense of community among the Ashen Ones of different worlds. Through messages, phantoms, and invasions, they communicate across the boundaries of individual realities, sharing knowledge and assistance while also competing for resources and glory. This network of interaction creates a sense that the Ashen One's quest is part of a larger pattern of similar attempts across multiple versions of reality. The gradual revelation of the Ashen One's past adds depth to their character development. Through item descriptions, NPC dialogue, and environmental storytelling, players piece together hints about who their character was before their failed attempt to link the fire. These revelations are always incomplete and often ambiguous, allowing each player to develop their own interpretation of their character's history and motivations. The relationship between the Ashen One and the various NPCs they encounter evolves based on player choices and actions. Some characters come to see the Ashen One as a savior, others as a threat, and still others as simply another actor in a cosmic drama too large for any individual to comprehend. These relationships provide emotional weight to the journey and help ground the cosmic themes in human experience. The quest lines that various NPCs offer to the Ashen One serve as parallel narratives that illuminate different aspects of the main story. Each questline explores different themes: love and loss, duty and rebellion, faith and doubt, while contributing to the overall understanding of what is at stake in the dying world. Completing these quests often requires difficult choices that test the Ashen One's developing moral framework. The areas that the Ashen One explores serve as both battlegrounds and archaeological sites, each location telling part of the larger story through its design and inhabitants. The way these areas connect to each other, both physically and thematically, creates a sense of a world that is coherent despite its cosmic instability. Each new location reveals more about the nature of the crisis and the various forces that have contributed to it. As the Ashen One grows in power and understanding, they begin to attract the attention of entities beyond the normal scope of mortal awareness. The Lords of Cinder themselves begin to take notice of this persistent undead who refuses to abandon their quest, despite its apparent futility. This attention brings both opportunities and dangers, as the Ashen One becomes a player in conflicts that span ages and realities. The transformation of the Ashen One from a simple risen corpse to a figure of cosmic significance happens gradually and organically. They do not suddenly gain great power or revelation, but rather accumulate strength and wisdom through their experiences. Each victory, each failure, each choice made and consequence accepted adds to their development as both a character and a force for change in their dying world. The ultimate nature of the Ashen One remains deliberately ambiguous. They may be a tool of cosmic forces beyond their understanding, a genuinely independent agent capable of changing the course of destiny, or something else entirely. This ambiguity is crucial to the game's themes, as it allows players to project their own understanding and values onto their character, while still engaging with the larger questions the narrative poses. The Ashen One's quest ultimately becomes a journey of self-discovery, as much as world-saving. Through their interactions with the dying world and its inhabitants, they come to understand not just what they are fighting for, but who they are becoming in the process. This personal transformation parallels the cosmic transformation taking place around them, suggesting that individual change and universal change are ultimately inseparable. Chapter 3: Lothric, where heroes come to die. High above the dying world, perched on cliffs that seem to scrape the very heavens, stands the kingdom of Lothric. This realm represents the pinnacle of human achievement in the Age of Fire, a civilization that has mastered both scholarly pursuit and martial prowess in service of maintaining the cosmic order. Yet for all its grandeur and power, Lothric has become exactly what its unofficial motto suggests: a place where heroes come to die, where the greatest warriors and wisest scholars come to exhaust themselves against challenges that grow ever more insurmountable. The architecture of Lothric speaks to ambitions that dwarf even the grandest human endeavors of previous ages. Its towers stretch impossibly high, connected by bridges that span distances which should be unbridgeable. The stonework displays a level of craftsmanship that suggests not just skilled masons, but a society that had achieved near-perfect synthesis between artistic vision and engineering capability. Every arch, every spire, every carefully carved detail speaks to a people who believed they could literally build their way to heaven. Yet this same architecture tells a story of overreach and decline. The very height of Lothric's towers makes them vulnerable to the winds of change that sweep across the dying world. The bridges that connect different sections of the kingdom have begun to crumble, creating gaps that can only be crossed by the most determined travelers. The beautiful stonework shows signs of age and stress, hairline cracks that suggest the whole structure may be more fragile than it appears. The Library of Lothric represents perhaps the greatest accumulation of knowledge in human history. Its shelves stretch beyond easy counting, filled with tomes that document every aspect of the cosmic order, from the most fundamental principles of magic to the most obscure historical details of previous ages. The scholars who tend this vast collection have dedicated their lives to understanding the mechanisms by which reality operates, believing that sufficient knowledge might provide solutions to even the most intractable problems. Yet, the very vastness of this knowledge has become a kind of trap. The scholars of Lothric know so much about how the world works that they have become paralyzed by the complexity of the forces they seek to control. They understand the theoretical requirements for linking the fire better than anyone before them, but this understanding has revealed the true scope of the sacrifice required. They know exactly what they are asking when they demand that someone burn themselves to fuel the cosmic order. The Cathedral of the Deep stands as a monument to Lothric's attempt to deal with one of the most troubling developments of the current age. As the barriers between different forms of darkness have begun to break down, new and corrupted forms of faith have emerged to challenge traditional religious authority. The cathedral was built to contain and study these new phenomena, but its very existence acknowledges that the old certainties about good and evil, light and dark, have begun to break down. The inhabitants of the cathedral have paid a terrible price for their proximity to these dark mysteries. Many have been transformed by their exposure to the deep's influence, becoming something that is neither fully human nor entirely monstrous. Their fate serves as a warning about the dangers of trying to understand forces that may be fundamentally incomprehensible to human consciousness. Prince Lothric himself embodies both the promise and the tragedy of his kingdom. Born with the perfect bloodline and magical potential necessary to serve as kindling for the first flame, he represents the culmination of generations of careful breeding and preparation. His very existence is a testament to human ingenuity and determination, proof that mortal beings can shape themselves to meet even cosmic challenges. Yet Lothric's refusal to fulfill his destiny speaks to a wisdom that transcends mere knowledge. Despite possessing all the information necessary to understand his role in the cosmic order, he has made the profound choice to reject that role entirely. His refusal is not born of ignorance or cowardice, but of a deep understanding of the futility of the sacrifice being asked of him. The relationship between Prince Lothric and his brother Lorien adds another layer of complexity to their story. Lorien, once a mighty knight capable of slaying demons, willingly shared his brother's curse and burden. This act of love and solidarity between brothers creates one of the most touching relationships in the entire Dark Souls series, while also demonstrating the personal costs of the cosmic drama playing out around them. The curse that affects both brothers manifests differently in each. Lothric's body is frail and sickly, unable to bear the physical demands that his cosmic role would require. Lorien, once a powerful warrior, has been rendered mute and partially paralyzed by sharing his brother's burden. Together, they represent the idea that even perfect reparation and unlimited love cannot overcome the fundamental problems with the cosmic order they are supposed to serve. The High Wall of Lothric serves as the kingdom's first line of defense, but also as a barrier that increasingly separates the realm from the outside world. The wall's massive scale demonstrates the engineering capabilities of Lothric's builders, while its current state reveals the practical challenges of maintaining such ambitious constructions. Entire sections have begun to crumble, creating gaps that allow unwanted intrusion, while also providing escape routes for those seeking to flee the kingdom's growing problems. The knights who patrol the High Wall represent the finest martial traditions of Lothric, warriors trained from birth in the arts of combat and magical enhancement. Their equipment displays the technological sophistication of their civilization, with armor and weapons that incorporate both masterful craftsmanship and powerful enchantments. Yet these same knights have begun to show signs of the hollow curse, their dedication to duty gradually eroding their essential humanity. The transformation of Lothric's knights into hollow guardians reflects the broader theme of how even the most noble purposes can become corrupted when pursued, without regard for human limitations. These warriors began as protectors of knowledge and order, but their absolute dedication to these ideals has gradually stripped away everything that made them worth protecting in the first place. The winged knights that serve as elite guardians throughout Lothric represent an attempt to transcend human limitations through magical enhancement and divine blessing. These massive warriors possess strength and resilience far beyond normal human capability, making them formidable opponents for any who would threaten the kingdom's security. Yet their transformation has also cost them much of what made them human, turning them into living weapons rather than thinking beings. The presence of these enhanced warriors throughout Lothric raises questions about the kingdom's values and priorities. In their pursuit of perfect defenders, the rulers of Lothric have created beings that are more like animated statues than living knights. This transformation reflects the broader tendency of the kingdom to treat human beings as materials, to be shaped in service of larger purposes, rather than as individuals with their own intrinsic worth. The Grand Archives represent the ultimate expression of Lothric's faith in knowledge as a solution to cosmic problems. This vast library contains not just books, but also magical experiments, preserved specimens, and research apparatus that demonstrate the incredible scope of the scholars' investigations. Every aspect of the cosmic order has been studied, catalogued, and analyzed in hope of finding solutions to the approaching crisis. Yet the archives also reveal the limitations of purely intellectual approaches to cosmic problems. The scholars have become so focused on understanding the mechanisms of reality that they have lost sight of the purposes those mechanisms are supposed to serve. They know exactly how to link the fire, but they have forgotten why anyone would want to do so. The crystal sages who conduct research in the archives represent the pinnacle of magical scholarship, beings who have dedicated themselves so completely to the pursuit of knowledge that they have transcended many human limitations. Their crystalline nature allows them to perceive magical forces with unprecedented clarity, while also granting them near immortality. Yet this transformation has also cost them much of their humanity, making them more like living calculations than sentient beings. The experiments conducted in the archives reveal the lengths to which Lothric scholars have gone in their search for solutions. They have attempted to create artificial lords of cinder, to synthesize new forms of soul energy, and to manipulate the fundamental forces that govern reality itself. Some of these experiments have produced useful results, but many have also created new problems that threaten to compound the existing crisis. The garden areas of Lothric provide a stark contrast to the sterile intellectualism of the archives and the militant functionality of the High Wall. These spaces were designed to provide beauty and tranquility, places where the kingdom's inhabitants could appreciate the natural world that their civilization was built to protect. Yet, even these gardens show signs of the cosmic instability that threatens everything, with plants that grow in impossible configurations and flowers that bloom out of season. The caretakers, who tend these gardens, represent a different aspect of Lothric's culture, people who value beauty and growth over knowledge and power. Their continued dedication to maintaining these spaces, despite the approaching crisis, demonstrates a form of hope that transcends rational calculation. They continue to plant and water and prune because the act of nurturing life has value in itself. regardless of whether that life will survive the coming changes. The relationship between the various classes and groups within Lothric reveals a society that has achieved remarkable stability through careful specialization and hierarchy. Each group has its own role to play in maintaining the kingdom's function, from the scholars who seek understanding, to the knights who provide protection, to the craftsmen who create the tools necessary for both. This specialization has allowed Lothric to achieve heights of civilization that would be impossible for a less organized society. Yet this same specialization has also created isolation and misunderstanding between different groups. The scholars often fail to appreciate the practical challenges faced by the knights, while the knights may not understand the theoretical complexities that occupy the scholars. This fragmentation has made it difficult for the kingdom to develop unified responses to the cosmic crisis that threatens them all. The religious traditions of Lothric reflect an attempt to synthesize the worship of light with acknowledgement of the growing power of darkness. The kingdom's churches and shrines honor traditional gods while also incorporating newer understandings about the nature of cosmic forces. This synthetic approach has allowed Lothric to maintain religious stability, even as traditional certainties have begun to break down elsewhere. Yet this religious synthesis has also created new forms of confusion and doubt. The citizens of Lothric are no longer certain which gods they should pray to, or which rituals will provide protection. The traditional ceremonies that once provided comfort and meaning have become hollow forms that fail to address the real spiritual needs of people facing cosmic uncertainty. The economic systems that support Lothric's grand ambitions reveal both the kingdom's strengths and its vulnerabilities. The realm has achieved unprecedented prosperity through careful management of resources and development of new technologies. Trade routes connect Lothric to distant regions, bringing in materials and knowledge that support the kingdom's various projects. The citizens enjoy a standard of living that surpasses anything achieved by previous civilizations. Yet this prosperity depends on maintaining the cosmic order that allows such complex systems to function. As that order begins to break down, the economic foundations of Lothric's success become increasingly unstable. Trade routes become unreliable, technologies fail in unpredictable ways, and the careful calculations that support the kingdom's wealth become meaningless when the basic assumptions about reality no longer hold true. The military forces of Lothric represent the most sophisticated integration of magical and martial power ever achieved by human civilization. The kingdom's armies combine traditional weapons and tactics with powerful sorceries and miraculous enhancements, creating fighting forces capable of confronting any conventional threat. Their training methods and equipment represent the culmination of centuries of military development and magical research. Yet, for all their power, these forces prove inadequate against the cosmic threats that now beset the kingdom. The hollowing curse affects even the most elite warriors, gradually stripping away their humanity while leaving their combat skills intact. The result is an army of perfect soldiers who no longer remember why they fight or what they are protecting. The fate of Lothric ultimately serves as a meditation on the limits of human achievement. Despite possessing unprecedented knowledge, power, and resources, the kingdom finds itself unable to solve the fundamental problems that threaten its existence. The very qualities that made Lothric great, its ambition, its intellectual rigor, its unwavering dedication to perfection, have become sources of paralysis when confronted with challenges that cannot be overcome through traditional means. As the Ashen One explores the various districts and levels of Lothric, they witness a civilization caught between its glorious past and its uncertain future. The kingdom stands as both an inspiration and a warning, demonstrating the heights that human ambition can achieve, while also revealing the costs of pursuing perfection in an imperfect world. Chapter 4: The Abyss Watchers and the Tragedy of Eternal Vigilance. Deep in the heart of Farron Keep, where ancient trees stretch their gnarled branches toward a sky that seems perpetually caught between dusk and dawn, lies one of the most tragic spectacles in all of Dark Souls 3. Here, in a grand arena that once hosted ceremonies of honor and brotherhood, the Abyss Watchers continue their eternal battle, not against the forces of darkness they swore to oppose, but against each other, locked in an endless cycle of death and resurrection that has transformed their sacred duty into a nightmare of perpetual conflict. The origin of the Abyss Watchers lies in the legend of Knight Artorius, the great hero who once walked in the Abyss and fought against its corrupting influence. When Artorius fell to the very darkness he sought to contain, his legacy inspired others to take up his mantle. These followers did not merely admire Artorius from afar, they made a literal pact with his spirit, sharing in the power of his wolf blood and binding themselves to his eternal mission of protecting the world from abyssal corruption. This wolf blood covenant created something unprecedented in the Dark Souls universe, a shared soul that connected all members of the Abyss Watchers across space and time. When one Watcher sensed the presence of the Abyss, all Watchers felt that same urgency. When one fell in battle, their essence returned to strengthen the others. This connection allowed the Watchers to operate as a unified force, despite being scattered across vast distances, making them incredibly effective at their chosen task. The irony of their current situation becomes clear when we understand the mechanics of their shared soul. The same connection that once made them powerful guardians against corruption has become the source of their downfall. When some Watchers began to show signs of abyssal taint, an inevitable consequence of prolonged exposure to the forces they fought, the shared soul ensured that this corruption spread to all members of the Order. Unable to purge the taint without destroying themselves, they turned their weapons on each other in a desperate attempt to prevent the spread of the very evil they had sworn to fight. The Keep of Farron, where the Watchers make their stand, reflects both their noble purpose and their tragic fate. The architecture speaks to a military order that valued function over form, with practical fortifications designed to house warriors rather than impress visitors. Yet the decay that has overtaken the keep tells a different story of structures maintained by beings who no longer fully understand their original purpose, who continue to perform the motions of their duty long after the meaning has been drained away. The poisoned swamp that surrounds the keep serves as both natural defense and symbolic representation of the corruption that the Watchers have spent so long fighting. This fetid water carries with it the accumulated poison of countless battles against dark forces, creating an environment where nothing clean or pure can long survive. That the Watchers themselves have become immune to this poison speaks to how thoroughly they have been changed by their long war against corruption. The Gru that inhabit the swamp represent what happens to lesser beings, who are exposed to the same corrupting influences that the Watchers have spent their existence fighting. These twisted creatures were once human, but prolonged exposure to dark magic and poisonous environments has transformed them into something barely recognizable. They serve as a constant reminder of what the Watchers themselves might become if they ever abandoned their vigilance entirely. The ancient trees that dominate the landscape of Farron carry their own significance in the broader mythology of Dark Souls. These massive organisms have stood for millennia, witnessing the rise and fall of countless civilizations, while remaining largely unchanged themselves. Their presence in the Watcher's domain suggests a connection between the natural world and the forces of preservation that the Order represents. Yet even these ancient trees show signs of the corruption that permeates the region. Their bark has darkened, their leaves have taken on unhealthy hues, and their roots have begun to spread in patterns that suggest more than natural growth. The trees themselves have become part of the battlefield between order and chaos, their slow transformation serving as a timeline for the gradual failure of the Watcher's mission. The various ruins scattered throughout Farron Keep tell the story of previous civilizations that once thrived in this region. Each collapsed structure represents a different attempt to build something permanent, in a world where permanence itself is under constant threat. The Watchers have inherited not just the duty to fight corruption, but also the responsibility to protect these monuments to human achievement from forces that would reduce them to dust. The wolf companions that still roam the keep represent the last vestiges of the connection between the Watchers and their spiritual predecessor, Artorius. These creatures carry within them fragments of the same wolf blood that flows through the Watcher's veins, making them both allies and living reminders of what the Order has lost. Their loyalty to the Watchers remains unshaken, even as the Watchers themselves have forgotten the original meaning of their mission. When the Ashen One finally encounters the Abyss Watchers in their grand arena, the true scope of their tragedy becomes apparent. These are not mindless hollows or corrupted monsters, but skilled warriors who retain their combat prowess and tactical intelligence. They fight with the same techniques and coordination that once made them legendary protectors, but they turn these abilities against each other in an endless cycle of fraternal violence. The mechanics of their battle reflect the philosophical complexity of their situation. The Watchers will attack not only the Ashen One, but also each other, their shared corruption making it impossible for them to distinguish between true threats and fellow members of their order. Some fight with their traditional weapons and techniques, while others show signs of abyssal influence that manifests as dark magic and altered fighting styles. The battle becomes a three-way conflict where alliance and enmity shift from moment to moment. The arena itself bears witness to countless iterations of this same battle. The stone floor is stained with the blood of repeated conflicts, while the walls show damage from weapons and magic that suggest these fights have been going on for a very long time. This is not a recent development, but the culmination of a slow decline that has been building for ages, a gradual transformation of sacred duty into meaningless violence. The most haunting aspect of the Abyss Watchers' story is the suggestion that they are aware, on some level, of what has happened to them. Moments of clarity occasionally break through their compulsive violence, brief instances where they seem to recognize the futility of their situation. Yet they are unable to stop themselves from continuing the cycle, bound by the same oath that once gave their lives meaning to perpetuate actions that have lost all purpose. The second phase of their battle reveals the true nature of the Lord of Cinder that emerges from their collective soul. This being represents not any individual Watcher, but the distilled essence of their shared purpose and shared corruption. It fights with abilities that no single Watcher possessed, wielding both flame and abyss in ways that demonstrate the fundamental contradiction at the heart of their existence. The flame that the Lord of Cinder commands is not the pure fire of the first flame, but something tainted by its contact with abyssal forces. This corrupted flame burns with colors that should not exist and produces effects that violate the normal relationships between light and dark. It represents the inevitable result of fighting darkness with darkness, of using the enemy's own weapons in the hope of achieving victory. The arena where this final confrontation takes place contains subtle details that speak to the Watchers' former glory. Banners bearing their symbol still hang from the walls, though faded and torn by age and conflict. Weapons and armor scattered throughout the space suggest that many more Watchers once gathered here for ceremonies and councils. The scale of the space itself indicates that this order was once much larger and more influential than the few remaining members might suggest. The victory of the Ashen One over the Abyss Watchers represents more than just another boss defeated. It serves as a mercy killing for an order that has outlived its purpose and meaning. By claiming their Lord of Cinder soul, the Ashen One both ends their suffering and ensures that their sacrifice will contribute to whatever resolution the cosmic crisis ultimately takes. Yet there is also a sense of loss in this victory. The Abyss Watchers, for all their tragic fate, represented one of the last organized attempts to maintain the boundaries between order and chaos. Their defeat removes one of the few remaining institutions dedicated to protecting the world from corrupting influences, leaving the field open for forces that may prove far more dangerous than anything the Watchers ever faced. The weapons and magic that the Watchers wielded tell their own story of adaptation and compromise. Their traditional gear shows the influence of their connection to Artorias, with designs that echo his legendary equipment, while incorporating improvements developed through centuries of experience. Yet their later innovations show increasing influence from the very forces they fought against. Dark magic and corrupted materials integrated into their arsenal out of necessity. This progression of equipment reflects the broader theme of how prolonged conflict changes those who engage in it. The Watchers began as pure guardians fighting against corruption, but the demands of their mission gradually forced them to adopt methods and tools that brought them closer to what they opposed. Each compromise seemed reasonable at the time, but the cumulative effect was a fundamental transformation of their nature. The legacy of the Abyss Watchers extends beyond their immediate fate to influence the broader narrative of Dark Souls 3. Their story serves as a warning about the dangers of absolute dedication to any cause, no matter how noble. It demonstrates how even the most heroic purposes can become corrupted when pursued without regard for consequences or cost. The various NPCs who reference the Watchers throughout the game provide different perspectives on their significance. Some remember them as heroes who sacrifice themselves to protect the world, while others see them as cautionary examples of what happens when duty becomes more important than humanity. These varying interpretations reflect the complex moral landscape of Dark Souls 3, where simple categories of good and evil prove inadequate for understanding the motivations and consequences of different actions. The environmental storytelling throughout Farron Keep reinforces the themes explored through the Watcher's direct narrative. Every poisoned pool, every corrupted tree, every collapsed structure speaks to the long-term costs of the battle between order and chaos. The keep itself has become a monument to the idea that victory and defeat are often indistinguishable when viewed from a sufficient distance. The music that accompanies the Abyss Watchers' battle captures both the nobility of their original purpose and the tragedy of their current situation. The composition combines martial themes that speak to their warrior heritage with melancholic elements that underscore the sadness of their fate. The music swells during moments of particular intensity, as if trying to remind listeners of the glory that these warriors once possessed. The connection between the Abyss Watchers and the broader cycle of linking the fire adds another layer of meaning to their story. As Lords of Cinder, they were once expected to serve as fuel for the first flame when the time came for renewal. Their current state makes this sacrifice impossible, as beings trapped in eternal conflict cannot perform the focused act of will necessary to kindle themselves for the flame's benefit. This inability to fulfill their role as Lords of Cinder creates a cosmic problem that extends beyond their personal tragedy. The flame requires all Lords of Cinder to participate in its renewal, making the Watchers' corruption a threat to the stability of the entire cosmic order. Their personal failure becomes a universal crisis, demonstrating how individual choices and fates can have consequences that reach far beyond their immediate scope. The question of whether the Abyss Watchers could have chosen a different path remains one of the most haunting aspects of their story. Their dedication to their mission was absolute, but this very dedication may have blinded them to alternative approaches that might have achieved their goals without requiring their own destruction. The game suggests that their tragedy was not inevitable, but rather the result of choices made without full understanding of their long-term consequences. As the Ashen One leaves the ruined keep of Farron, they carry with them not just the soul of the Abyss Watchers, but also the weight of their example. The Watcher's story serves as both inspiration and warning for anyone who would take on the responsibility of protecting others from cosmic threat. It demonstrates that good intentions are not sufficient protection against corruption, and that even the most heroic sacrifices can become meaningless if they are not grounded in wisdom as well as courage. Chapter 5. Aldrich, Saint of the Deep. In the Grand Cathedral of the Deep, where soaring arches reach toward heavens that seem increasingly distant, lies one of the most disturbing transformations in all of Dark Souls lore. Aldrich, once known as the Saint of the Deep, has become something that defies easy categorization. Neither fully alive nor entirely dead, neither wholly human nor completely monstrous, his evolution from respected cleric to cosmic horror represents one of the most thorough corruptions of religious authority ever documented, a transformation so complete that it calls into question the very nature of faith and devotion. The origins of Aldrich's transformation lie in the early days of his religious career, when he served as a humble cleric in one of the many churches that dotted the landscape of the dying world. His reputation for piety and learning attracted followers from across the land, people seeking spiritual guidance in an age when traditional certainties had begun to crumble. Aldrich seemed to offer exactly what these desperate souls needed: clear answers, confident leadership, and the promise of salvation in a world that appeared to be beyond saving. The title Saint of the Deep was not originally meant to be ominous. In the early theology that Aldrich preached, the deep represented the profound spiritual truths that lay beneath the surface of conventional religious understanding. He taught that true faith required believers to dive beneath the shallow waters of ordinary devotion to discover the deeper currents of divine truth that flowed through all existence. This metaphor resonated with followers who felt that traditional religious practices had become empty rituals, disconnected from genuine spiritual experience. Aldrich's early sermons spoke of hunger in terms that seemed purely metaphorical. He taught that spiritual seekers should hunger for truth, thirst for righteousness, and consume the word of their deity with the same urgency that the body craved physical nourishment. His congregation found these teachings compelling because they addressed the sense of spiritual emptiness that had begun to afflict so many in the dying world. He was a leader who understood their deepest needs and offered concrete methods for satisfying them. The cathedral that would eventually bear his name was built during the height of Aldrich's influence, when his teachings had attracted followers from across the known world. This magnificent structure was designed to accommodate the thousands who sought to hear his words, with acoustics carefully engineered to carry his voice to every corner of the vast space. The architecture itself embodied his theological vision, with deep pools and flowing water features that reinforced his central metaphor of diving into spiritual depths. The transformation began subtly, with changes in Aldrich's teaching that seemed like natural developments of his existing theology. He began to speak more literally about consumption and hunger, suggesting that spiritual nourishment required actual ingestion of sacred substances. At first, these substances were traditional elements like blessed bread and wine, but gradually the requirements became more exotic and disturbing. The congregation, already deeply invested in Aldrich's authority and desperate for any source of meaning in their chaotic world, accepted these changes without significant resistance. They trusted their saint's judgment and believed that his demands, however strange they might seem, were necessary steps on the path to enlightenment. This trust would prove to be their downfall, as it prevented them from recognizing the true nature of what was happening until it was far too late to escape. The physical transformation of Aldrich himself began around the same time as the changes in his teaching. His body began to take on a peculiar consistency, becoming softer and more malleable, while also growing in size. His followers interpreted these changes as signs of divine favor, evidence that their saint was being transformed into something greater than merely human. They failed to recognize that what they were witnessing was not ascension, but corruption of the most fundamental kind. The deep magic that Aldrich began to wield represented a form of sorcery that had not been seen in the world before. This was not the clean geometric magic of traditional sorcery, nor the primal force of pyromancy, nor even the divine power of conventional miracles. Instead, it was something that seemed to emerge from the spaces between established magical traditions, drawing power from sources that defied easy categorization. The effects of this deep magic were both subtle and profound. It could influence the minds and emotions of those exposed to it, creating feelings of spiritual ecstasy that masked underlying psychological manipulation. It could alter the physical properties of matter, transforming ordinary substances into things that violated natural law. Most disturbingly, it could change the fundamental nature of living beings, corrupting them from within while maintaining the appearance of normal existence. The congregation that gathered around Aldrich during his period of transformation provides a case study in how religious authority can be used to facilitate the most horrific forms of abuse. These faithful believers, seeking genuine spiritual fulfillment, found themselves gradually inducted into practices that would have horrified them if presented directly. Instead, each step in their corruption was presented as a necessary advancement in their spiritual development, a test of their faith and commitment. The role of the cathedral's architecture in facilitating Aldrich's corruption cannot be overlooked. The deep pools that had once served as symbolic representations of spiritual depth became literal feeding grounds, where the transformed saint could consume those who had trusted him with their spiritual welfare. The flowing water that had once represented the movement of divine grace became a medium for transporting the remains of his victims to whatever digestive processes his transformed body required. The clergy who served under Aldrich during his transformation faced an impossible choice between loyalty to their spiritual superior and recognition of the horror he had become. Many chose to maintain their faith in his divine mission, even as the evidence of his corruption became undeniable. Others attempted to resist or flee, but found themselves trapped by the same institutional structures that had once provided them with purpose and identity. The deep creatures that began to appear throughout the cathedral represent the end result of prolonged exposure to Aldrich's corrupted influence. These beings were once human followers who had been so thoroughly transformed by deep magic that they could no longer be recognized as having ever possessed human nature. They serve as living warnings about the ultimate fate that awaits anyone who places absolute trust in corrupt authority. The particular horror of Aldrich's consumption of Gwendolen adds a cosmic dimension to his personal corruption. Gwendolen, the last remaining child of Gwen and guardian of the illusions that maintained Anna Londo's apparent glory, represented one of the few remaining connections between the current age and the divine authority that had shaped it. By literally consuming this deity, Aldrich was not just satisfying his transformed hunger, but actively participating in the dismantling of the cosmic order. The manner of this consumption reveals the sophistication of Aldrich's corruption. He did not simply kill Gwendolen and consume the corpse, but rather began a process of gradual absorption that allowed him to access the deity's memories, powers, and spiritual essence, while keeping the victim conscious and aware throughout the process. This method maximized both the practical benefits of the consumption and the suffering it inflicted. The magic that Aldrich gains access to through his consumption of Gwendolen represents a perversion of divine authority that goes beyond mere theft of power. By incorporating the deity's essence into his own corrupted being, Aldrich creates a hybrid entity that possesses divine capabilities while serving profoundly anti-divine purposes. The result is a form of blasphemy so complete that it threatens the fundamental categories through which the cosmic order understands itself. The arena where the Ashen One confronts Aldrich creates a perfect stage for this cosmic horror. The grand cathedral space, once designed to inspire awe and reverence, has been transformed into a feeding ground where the architectural elements that once elevated human spirits now serve to facilitate the consumption of human souls. The beautiful stained glass windows still cast colorful light across the space, but now they illuminate scenes of horror rather than moments of divine grace. The battle itself reveals the full extent of what Aldrich has become. His massive, slug-like body demonstrates the physical reality of his transformation, while his use of Gwendolen's magical abilities shows how thoroughly he has integrated his victim's essence into his own corrupted being. The combination creates something that is neither the saint he once was, nor the deity he has consumed, but a new form of entity that represents the worst aspects of both religious authority and divine power. The various attacks that Aldrich employs during combat tell the story of his transformation through their mechanics and visual effects. His ability to rain arrows of light represents Gwendolen's divine heritage, but the arrows themselves are tainted with the deep's corruption, creating attacks that combine the precision of divine justice with the unpredictability of chaotic evil. His teleportation abilities allow him to disappear into the floor of the cathedral and emerge elsewhere, suggesting that his connection to the deep has given him access to spaces and dimensions that exist outside normal reality. The soul of a Lord of Cinder that Aldrich possesses creates a fundamental contradiction within his being. As one who was supposed to serve as fuel for the First Flame's renewal, he should represent dedication to the cosmic order and willing sacrifice for the greater good. Instead, his Ruxus has turned him into something that actively opposes everything the linking of the fire is supposed to accomplish. His refusal to fulfill his role as Lord of Cinder is not just personal rebellion, but cosmic sabotage. The relationship between Aldrich and the other Lords of Cinder reveals different approaches to the burden of cosmic responsibility. Where the Abyss Watchers were destroyed by their dedication to duty, Aldrich has been corrupted by his rejection of duty. Where Uriam was broken by the consequences of fulfilling his responsibilities, Aldrich has embraced the consequences of abandoning his. These different responses to the same fundamental challenge create a spectrum of possible relationships between individual will and cosmic obligation. The deep magic that Aldrich wields represents more than just another school of sorcery. It embodies a fundamental challenge to the categories through which the Dark Souls universe understands reality. Traditional magic operates according to established principles that maintain the distinction between different types of power and different sources of authority. Deep magic ignores these distinctions, creating effects that draw power from multiple sources simultaneously, while serving purposes that transcend normal magical categories. The corruption that spreads throughout the Cathedral of the Deep during Aldrich's residence there demonstrates the environmental impact of his transformation. The very stones of the building begin to change, taking on properties that make them more suitable for his needs, while less suitable for their original purpose. The water that flows through the cathedral's channels becomes tainted with his essence, carrying his influence to every part of the structure and everyone who drinks from its sources. The faithful, who continue to serve Aldrich even after his transformation, provide perhaps the most disturbing aspect of his entire story. These individuals have witnessed the complete corruption of everything they once held sacred, yet they continue to maintain their loyalty and devotion. Their persistence raises troubling questions about the nature of faith itself and the point at which religious commitment becomes indistinguishable from willing participation in evil. The items and equipment associated with Aldrich and his followers tell their own story of gradual corruption and transformation. The weapons wielded by his servants show clear signs of influence from deep magic, with properties that violate normal expectations about how arms and armor should function. The religious vestments worn by his clergy have been altered to accommodate their changed bodies and purposes, creating garments that retain the forms of traditional religious dress, while serving entirely different functions. The legacy of Aldrich extends far beyond his immediate sphere of influence to affect the broader understanding of religious authority throughout the world of Dark Souls 3. His transformation serves as a warning about the dangers of placing absolute trust in any individual or institution, regardless of how sacred they might appear. The horror of his story lies not just in what he became, but in how thoroughly he was able to corrupt those who depended on him for spiritual guidance. The various NPCs throughout the game who reference Aldrich provide different perspectives on his significance and impact. Some remember him as a saint who lost his way, while others see him as a monster who was always hiding behind a facade of holiness. These different interpretations reflect the difficulty of understanding how genuine religious authority can become corrupted without losing its ability to command loyalty and obedience. The environmental storytelling throughout the Cathedral of the Deep reinforces the themes of corruption and transformation that define Aldrich's story. Every architectural detail that has been altered to serve his needs, every religious symbol that has been perverted to accommodate his nature, every space that has been transformed from a place of worship to a place of consumption tells part of the larger narrative about what happens when sacred institutions lose connection with their founding principles. The music that accompanies Aldrich's boss battle captures both the grandeur of the cathedral setting and the horror of what has taken place within it. The composition combines religious themes that evoke traditional sacred music with discordant elements that reflect the corruption of everything the cathedral was meant to represent. The result is a soundscape that feels simultaneously reverent and blasphemous, beautiful and terrifying. The defeat of Aldrich by the Ashen One represents more than just the elimination of another obstacle on the path to linking the fire. It serves as a form of exorcism, a cleansing of sacred space that has been defiled by corrupt authority. Yet the victory comes too late to save those who were consumed in the process of Aldrich's transformation, and too late to restore the cathedral to its original purpose. The space will always bear the scars of what happened there, serving as a permanent reminder of how thoroughly religious institutions can be corrupted when they lose sight of their fundamental purpose. As the Ashen One claims Aldrich as Lord of Cinder Soul, They inherit not just his power, but also the weight of his crimes. The soul carries within it the essence of all those who were consumed in the process of his transformation, making it a burden as much as a prize. This inheritance creates a moral complexity that extends beyond the simple mechanics of character progression to encompass questions about responsibility, redemption, and the possibility of finding meaning in the aftermath of profound evil. Chapter 6. Yhorm the Giant and the Burden of Sacrifice. In the profaned capital, a city that burns with flames that can never be extinguished, sits Yhorm the Giant upon his throne of ash and regret. This massive ruler, whose very presence dwarfs the grandest human architecture, embodies perhaps the most tragic understanding of duty and sacrifice in all of Dark Souls lore. His story is one of good intentions leading to devastating consequences, of a king who saved his people by destroying them, and of the terrible loneliness that comes with power, so great that it isolates its wielder from everything they sought to protect. Yhorm's origins lie in the complex relationship between giants and humans that has defined much of the Dark Souls series. Unlike the hostile giants encountered in previous games, Yhorm represented something unprecedented, a giant ruler who genuinely cared for his human subjects and sought to bridge the gap between the two species. His size and strength, which could have made him a tyrant, were instead dedicated to protection and service. The profaned capital itself stands as a testament to this unusual relationship between giant and human cultures. The architecture demonstrates a synthesis of building styles, with structures designed to accommodate both human-scale inhabitants and their giant protect. The city's layout reflects careful planning that considered the needs of both communities, creating spaces where giants and humans could coexist peacefully. The profaned flame that burns throughout the city represents one of the most mysterious and dangerous forces in the Dark Souls universe. Unlike the first flame, which brings light and order, or the Chaos Flame, which brings destruction and change, the profaned flame seems to exist in a category entirely its own. It burns without consuming, provides light without warmth, and creates illumination that somehow makes the darkness seem deeper rather than driving it away. The origin of this flame remains one of the great mysteries of Yhorm's story. Some accounts suggest that it emerged spontaneously from the depths beneath the city, a natural phenomenon that the inhabitants learned to live with, rather than something they deliberately created. Other versions of the tale imply that the flame was somehow connected to Yhorm himself, perhaps a manifestation of his own inner nature, or a byproduct of his unique position as a giant king, ruling over humans. What is clear is that the profaned flame posed a constant threat to the inhabitants of the capital. Its presence created an environment where traditional forms of fire could not be safely maintained, making cooking, heating, and metallurgy difficult or impossible. The citizens learned to adapt their lifestyle to accommodate this strange fire, developing techniques and technologies that worked within the constraints it imposed. Yhorm's throne room reflects both his power and his isolation. The massive space was designed to accommodate his giant stature, while also providing areas where human advisors and petitioners could approach him safely. Yet the sheer scale of the room emphasizes the gulf between the king and his subjects, making every interaction a reminder of the fundamental differences that separated them, despite their mutual respect and affection. The various human settlements within the profaned capital tell the story of a people who found ways to thrive despite the challenges posed by their unusual environment. The architecture shows evidence of innovative approaches to construction and urban planning, with buildings designed to channel or deflect the profaned flame's influence, rather than simply trying to block it. These adaptations demonstrate the creativity and resilience of people who refuse to be defeated by circumstances beyond their control. The court that surrounded Yhorm included both giant and human members, creating a unique form of government that attempted to represent the interests of both communities. The challenges of maintaining such a diverse court were enormous, as the different species had different needs, different lifespans, and different perspectives on time and change. Yet for a while, this system seems to have worked, creating a form of rule that was more just and inclusive than anything achieved by purely human or purely giant societies. The threat that ultimately led to Yhorm's terrible choice came not from external enemies, but from within the capital itself. The profaned flame, which had been contained and managed for so long, began to show signs of instability. Whether this was due to natural changes in its nature, interference from outside forces, or simply the accumulated effects of time, the flame started to spread beyond its traditional boundaries and threaten the entire city. The court's response to this crisis reveals the political and practical challenges of governing a diverse society facing existential threat. Human advisors, with their shorter lifespans and different relationship to time, advocated for immediate action, even if it involved significant risks. Giant advisors, with their longer perspective and different understanding of change, favored patience and careful observation. Yoram found himself caught between these different approaches, forced to make decisions that would satisfy neither side completely. The magical and technological resources available to the profaned capital were considerable, representing the accumulated knowledge and skill of both human and giant civilizations. Scholars and craftsmen worked together to develop new methods for containing or redirecting the profaned flame, creating innovations that pushed the boundaries of what either culture had achieved independently. Yet despite their best efforts, the crisis continued to worsen. The various attempts to control the spreading flame tell their own story of increasing desperation and declining options. Early efforts focused on traditional methods of fire suppression and containment, approaches that had worked with conventional flames, but proved inadequate against the unique properties of the profaned fire. Later attempts involved more exotic approaches, including magical barriers, architectural modifications, and even negotiations with entities that claimed to understand the flame's nature. The turning point came when it became clear that conventional methods would not be sufficient to save the city. The profaned flame was not just spreading, but was actively transforming everything it touched, changing the fundamental nature of matter and energy in ways that threatened to make the capital uninhabitable for any form of life. Faced with the choice between watching his people slowly succumb to this transformation or taking drastic action that might save them, Yom made the decision that would define the rest of his existence. The choice to link the fire himself was not made lightly or quickly. Yom understood that his sacrifice would provide the power necessary to contain the profaned flame, but he also knew that it would fundamentally change his nature and his relationship with his subjects. As a Lord of Cinder, he would become something more than giant, more than king, but also something less than the individual who had earned his people's love and trust. The ritual of linking the fire in the profaned capital differed from similar ceremonies in other locations. The presence of the profaned flame created unique conditions that required modifications to the traditional process. The result was a linking that was both more powerful and more dangerous than usual, creating effects that went far beyond what anyone had anticipated or prepared for. The immediate aftermath of Yoram's sacrifice appeared to be successful. The profaned flame was contained, its spread halted, and the immediate threat to the city neutralized. For a brief moment, it seemed that the king's sacrifice had achieved its intended purpose without the devastating side effects that many had feared. The citizens celebrated their salvation and honored their transformed ruler as the hero who had saved them from extinction. But the true consequences of Yoram's action only became apparent over time. The linking of the fire had indeed contained the profaned flame, but it had also fundamentally altered the nature of the capital itself. The city began to burn with a different kind of fire, one that consumed not matter, but spirit, not bodies, but souls. The very act of salvation had become a form of damnation, transforming the place Yoram had died to save into something that his living self would have found unrecognizable. The citizens who had celebrated their king's sacrifice gradually began to understand what had really happened. They were not dying in any conventional sense, but they were no longer truly alive either. The fire that burned through their city was consuming everything that made life meaningful: memory, emotion, hope, love, while leaving behind only the empty shells of existence. They had been saved from one form of destruction, only to be subjected to another that was arguably worse. Yoram's resurrection as a Lord of Cinder completed his transformation from beloved king to isolated monster. His new form retained his memories and his love for his people, but it also carried with it the terrible knowledge of what his sacrifice had accomplished. He could see his subjects continuing their lives in the burning city, but he knew that they were no longer the people he had sought to save. They were echoes, shadows, remnants of what they had once been. The throne room where Yhorm now sits reflects this tragic transformation. The space that had once hosted celebrations and ceremonies now serves as a monument to failure and regret. The giant king remains in his seat, not because he is fulfilling his duties as a ruler, but because there is nowhere else for him to go, and nothing else for him to do. His people are beyond saving, his kingdom is beyond redemption, and his sacrifice has accomplished nothing except to create new forms of suffering. The Storm Ruler, the weapon specifically designed to defeat giants, adds another layer of tragedy to Yhorm's story. This blade was created by his own people as a failsafe, a means of stopping their giant king if he ever became a threat to them. The fact that such a weapon exists at all speaks to the complex relationship between trust and fear that defined the relationship between Yhorm and his subjects. They loved and respected their king, but they also understood that his power made him inherently dangerous. The decision to create the Storm Ruler was likely made during the early days of Yhorm's reign, when the integration of giant and human societies was still experimental and uncertain. The weapon represents a form of insurance policy, a way for the human population to protect itself if their giant protector ever became their giant oppressor. That Yhorm himself may have supported or even commissioned the weapon's creation speaks to his understanding of the burden that his power placed on his subjects. The blade itself is imbued with properties that make it uniquely effective against giant physiology. When properly wielded, it can generate winds and forces that can stagger even the largest opponents, creating opportunities for smaller fighters to strike at vulnerable points. The magic that powers these effects draws on principles that seem specifically designed to counter the natural advantages that giants possess in combat. The irony that this weapon, created to protect humans from giants, would ultimately be used to free Yhorm from his own cursed existence, is not lost on those who understand the full scope of his story. The Storm Ruler becomes an instrument of mercy rather than conquest, a tool for ending suffering rather than inflicting it. This transformation of purpose reflects the broader themes of Dark Souls 3, where the meaning of actions often depends more on context and intention than on the inherent nature of the tools or techniques involved. Sigurd of Katarina's connection to Yhorm adds a personal dimension to the tragedy of the profaned capital. This knight, who represents the best traditions of honor and friendship, made a promise to Yhorm that he would end the giant king's suffering if the burden of rule ever became too great to bear. This promise was made during happier times, when both friends hoped it would never need to be fulfilled, but it demonstrates the depth of understanding that existed between them. The relationship between Sigurd and Yhorm illustrates the possibility of genuine friendship across the species barrier that divides giants and humans. Their bond was based not on political necessity or mutual advantage, but on shared values and genuine affection. Sigurd saw in Yhorm not a powerful ally to be cultivated, but a friend worthy of loyalty and sacrifice. Yhorm, in turn, trusted Sigurd with knowledge of his deepest fears and the responsibility for his ultimate fate. The quest to obtain the Storm Ruler and bring it to the final confrontation with Yhorm creates one of the most emotionally complex scenarios in Dark Souls 3. Players must choose whether to face the giant king alone, or to summon Sigurd and witness the fulfillment of an ancient promise. This choice affects not just the mechanics of the battle, but its emotional weight and narrative significance. When Sigurd fulfills his promise to Yhorm, the scene becomes something far removed from a typical boss fight. It is a mercy killing performed by a friend, an act of love disguised as an act of violence. The dialogue between the two characters reveals the pain that both have carried for so long, and their mutual relief that the burden is finally being lifted. This is not conquest, but liberation, not victory, but release. The battle itself, when fought alongside Sigurd, becomes a kind of ritual that honors both the friendship between the two characters and the tragedy of Yon's situation. The Giant King does not fight with the desperation of someone trying to avoid death, but with the resignation of someone who knows that death is the only escape from an unbearable existence. His attacks are powerful, but not frenzied, dangerous, but not desperate. The profaned flame that continues to burn throughout the capital during this final confrontation serves as a constant reminder of the choice that led to Yor's current state. The flame that he sacrificed himself to contain continues to burn, but its containment has come at a cost that makes the original threat seem trivial by comparison. The city is saved from one form of destruction but subjected to another that is arguably worse. The various areas of the profaned capital that players can explore tell the story of Yhorm's reign and its aftermath through environmental storytelling. The grand architecture speaks to the prosperity and cooperation that characterized his rule, while the current state of decay and abandonment reveals the long-term consequences of his sacrifice. Every room, every corridor, every architectural detail contributes to the overall narrative of rise and fall. The creatures that now inhabit the capital reflect the transformed nature of the city itself. These beings are not traditional enemies to be defeated, but remnants of what the city once contained. They exist in a state between life and death, animated by the profaned flame's influence, but lacking the essential qualities that would make them truly alive. Their presence serves as a constant reminder of what has been lost. The treasure and equipment found throughout the profaned capital tell their own story of a civilization that achieved great heights before its tragic downfall. The craftsmanship, evident in these items, reflects the skill and creativity of people who had access to both giant and human technological traditions. Yet these same items now serve as monuments to lost potential, beautiful objects that can no longer fulfill their intended purposes. The magic associated with the profaned capital represents a unique school of pyromancy that emerged from the city's exposure to the profaned flame. These spells combine the destructive power of fire magic with properties that reflect the strange nature of the flame itself. They burn without consuming, destroy without transforming, and create effects that seem to violate the normal relationships between cause and effect. The lore surrounding these spells suggests that they were developed by the court mages, who served Yhorm during his attempt to find solutions to the crisis facing his city. These scholars pushed the boundaries of magical knowledge in their desperate search for answers, creating new forms of magic that drew power from sources that had never been tapped before. The resulting spells are powerful but dangerous, effective but unpredictable. The political structure that governed the profaned capital during Yhorm's reign represents one of the most sophisticated attempts at cross-species cooperation in the Dark Souls universe. The system that evolved to accommodate both giant and human needs required innovations in law, administration, and social organization that went far beyond anything attempted by purely single-species societies. The success of this system, however temporary, demonstrates the potential for cooperation between different forms of intelligent life. The fall of this political system, following Yhorm's sacrifice, illustrates the fragility of institutions that depend on exceptional individuals for their continued function. When the Giant King transformed into something beyond normal political authority, the careful balance that had maintained peace and prosperity collapsed. The result was not chaos or civil war, but something worse: the gradual dissolution of everything that had made the society worth preserving. The architectural legacy of the profaned capital continues to influence the design of structures throughout the world. Of Dark Souls 3, the innovations developed to accommodate both giant and human inhabitants have been adopted by other communities, facing similar challenges. Yet these technical achievements cannot compensate for the loss of the social and cultural achievements that made the original city remarkable. The various NPCs throughout Dark Souls 3, who reference Yhorm and his story, provide different perspectives on his legacy and significance. Some remember him as a hero who made the ultimate sacrifice for his people, while others see him as a cautionary example of how good intentions can lead to devastating consequences. These different interpretations reflect the complexity of his story and the difficulty of making simple moral judgments about his choices. The soul of a Lord of Cinder that Yhorm possesses carries within it not just his individual essence, but also traces of all those who were affected by his sacrifice. When the Ashen One claims this soul, they inherit a burden that goes far beyond simple character progression. They become connected to the tragedy of the profaned capital and responsible, in some sense, for ensuring that the lessons of Yorm's story are not forgotten. The music that accompanies Yorm's boss battle captures both the grandeur of his position and the tragedy of his fate. The composition combines heroic themes that reflect his noble intentions with melancholic elements that underscore the sadness of his current situation. The music swells during moments of particular intensity, as if trying to remind listeners of the glory that this king once possessed and the love that his people once felt for him. The defeat of Yhorm represents one of the most complex moral victories in Dark Souls 3. The Ashen One is not conquering an enemy, but liberating a friend, not claiming a prize, but fulfilling a duty. The victory is bittersweet because it represents the end of suffering, but also the final failure of everything that Yhorm tried to accomplish. His death brings peace, but also confirms that his sacrifice was ultimately meaningless. The empty throne that Yhorm leaves behind serves as a monument to the dangers of absolute power and the loneliness of ultimate responsibility. No one will replace him, because no one could replace him. The system of government that he created was so dependent on his unique position and abilities that it could not survive his transformation. His throne will remain empty, not just because he is gone, but because the role he played was inherently impossible for anyone else to fill. As the Ashen One leaves the profaned capital, they carry with them the weight of Yorm's story and the questions it raises about duty, sacrifice, and the relationship between individual choice and collective good. His tale serves as a warning about the dangers of trying to solve complex problems through simple sacrifices, and the way that even the most noble intentions can lead to tragic consequences when they are not grounded in complete understanding of their likely effects. The legacy of Yorm extends beyond his immediate story to influence the broader themes of Dark Souls 3. His example demonstrates that the cycle of linking the fire is not just personally destructive for those who participate in it, but can also be devastating for the communities and civilizations that depend on their leaders. The cost of maintaining the cosmic order extends far beyond the individual sacrifices it demands to encompass entire societies and ways of life. Chapter 7: Prince Lothric and the Refusal. In the highest tower of the kingdom that bears his name, Prince Lothric waits in his chamber with the patience of one who has made a decision that will echo through eternity. This frail young man, bred from birth to serve as the perfect kindling for the first flame, has made the most radical choice possible in the cosmos of Dark Souls. He has simply said no. His refusal to fulfill his cosmic destiny represents not rebellion, born of anger or fear, but a calm rejection based on wisdom that transcends his apparent youth and physical frailty. Lothric's origins lie in one of the most ambitious eugenic projects ever undertaken in the Dark Souls universe. Generations of careful breeding and magical manipulation went into creating a prince with the perfect combination of bloodline, magical potential, and spiritual purity necessary to serve as ideal fuel for the first flame. Every aspect of his heritage was planned and controlled, from the noble lineages that contributed to his ancestry to the magical rituals that shaped his development in the womb. The court scholars who oversaw Lothric's creation believed they could engineer a solution to the cosmic crisis that had plagued their world for so long. By creating a being specifically designed for the purpose of linking the fire, they hoped to ensure that the next linking would be more effective and longer lasting than previous attempts. Their calculations suggested that Lothric's sacrifice would burn brighter and longer than any Lord of Cinder who had come before him. The irony of this careful planning is that it created exactly the kind of person who would be most likely to understand the futility of the task they had designed him for. Lothric's perfect breeding gave him not just the power necessary to link the fire, but also the intelligence and wisdom necessary to understand what that linking would truly accomplish. His magical abilities allowed him to perceive the cosmic forces at work in ways that ordinary humans could not, revealing truths that his creators had not anticipated. Prince Lothric's relationship with his brother Lorien adds a crucial human dimension to his cosmic significance. Lorien, once a mighty knight capable of slaying demons and dragons, chose to share his brother's curse and burden rather than allowing Lothric to face his destiny alone. This act of solidarity between brothers represents one of the purest expressions of love in the entire Dark Souls series, demonstrating that human connection can transcend even cosmic obligation. The curse that affects both brothers manifests in ways that seem almost calculated to prevent Lothric from fulfilling his intended purpose. His body is weak and sickly, unable to bear the physical demands that linking the fire would require. Lorien's disabilities, taken on voluntarily to share his brother's burden, create a situation where neither brother can act independently to fulfill Lothric's cosmic role. Together, they form a unit that is simultaneously more than the sum of its parts, and less capable of individual action. The tower chamber where the brothers wait reflects both their royal status and their isolation from the world they are supposed to save. The space is beautiful and comfortable, filled with books and magical apparatus that demonstrate their scholarly interests and intellectual pursuits. Yet, it is also clearly a prison, a place where they have chosen to isolate themselves from a world that demands a sacrifice they are unwilling to make. The library that fills much of their chamber contains some of the most advanced magical and philosophical texts in existence. These books represent the accumulated wisdom of countless scholars and mages, documenting every aspect of the cosmic order and its requirements. Lothric has read them all, and his reading has led him not to acceptance of his role, but to profound understanding of why that role should be rejected. The magical experiments that occupy much of Lothric's time represent his attempt to find alternative solutions to the cosmic crisis that faces his world. Rather than simply accepting the conventional wisdom that linking the fire is the only viable option, he has dedicated himself to researching other possibilities. His work has revealed the true nature of the cycle of ages and the artificial constraints that have been placed on the natural progression of cosmic change. The spells that Lothric has developed during his research represent some of the most advanced magic ever created by human practitioners. These sorceries combine elements from multiple magical traditions, while incorporating insights that could only come from someone with his unique perspective on cosmic forces. The magic he wields is not just powerful, but elegant, demonstrating a level of understanding that goes far beyond mere technical proficiency. The decision to refuse his cosmic destiny was not made lightly or quickly. Lothric spent years studying the history of previous linkings, analyzing the consequences of each attempt, and projecting the likely results of his own participation in the cycle. His conclusion was that linking the fire represented not salvation, but prolongation of suffering, a temporary delay that only made the eventual transition more painful and destructive. The philosophical framework that underlies Lothric's refusal draws on insights from multiple intellectual traditions, while incorporating his own unique understanding of cosmic mechanics. He argues that the cycle of linking the fire has become a form of cosmic addiction, a pattern of behavior that provides temporary relief while creating ever greater problems in the long term. His refusal represents an attempt to break this cycle and allow natural processes to resume their course. The political implications of Lothric's refusal extend far beyond his personal situation to affect the stability of the entire cosmic order. As the designated heir to the Flame's renewal, his rejection of that role creates a crisis that affects not just his own kingdom, but all the civilizations that depend on the Age of Fire's continuation. Kings and queens throughout the world find themselves forced to confront questions they had never expected to face. The reaction of Lothric's court to his refusal reveals the complex political dynamics that surround cosmic responsibility in the Dark Souls universe. Some advisors support his decision, seeing it as evidence of wisdom beyond his years. Others view it as selfish abdication of duty that threatens everything they have worked to build. Still others attempt to find middle grounds that might satisfy both the prince's conscience and the world's needs. The various attempts to convince Lothric to change his mind tell their own story of the desperation that grips those who depend on the Age of Fire's continuation. Diplomats arrive from distant kingdoms bearing gifts and arguments designed to persuade the prince to accept his destiny. Scholars present new interpretations of cosmic law that might make his sacrifice seem more palatable. Religious authorities invoke divine commandments and sacred traditions that supposedly require his compliance. Yet, Lothric remains unmoved by these appeals, not because he is insensitive to the suffering his refusal might cause, but because he understands that his compliance would only postpone and magnify that suffering. His response to each argument reveals depths of understanding that often surprise those who present them. He has considered not just the immediate consequences of his choice, but its implications across vast spans of time and multiple cycles of cosmic change. The magical defenses that protect Lothric's tower reflect both his power and his determination to maintain his chosen course. These barriers are not designed simply to keep intruders out, but to prevent anyone from forcing him to fulfill his cosmic role against his will. The spells that maintain these defenses draw power from sources that demonstrate his mastery of magical principles that go far beyond conventional sorcery. The relationship between Lothric and the other Lords of Cinder reveals different approaches to cosmic responsibility and the burden of exceptional power. Where the Abyss Watchers were destroyed by their dedication to duty, and Aldrich was corrupted by his abandonment of duty, Lothric has found a third path that involves conscious rejection of duty based on philosophical understanding of its true nature. The magic that Lothric employs during his final battle demonstrates both his power and his reluctance to use that power for its intended purpose. His spells are devastating in their effects, but elegant in their execution, showing mastery of magical principles while also revealing his deep understanding of the forces he is choosing not to serve. Every attack he makes seems calculated to demonstrate what he could accomplish if he chose to link the fire, while also proving why he refuses to make that choice. The arena where this final confrontation takes place reflects the intimate nature of the conflict. This is not a grand battlefield where cosmic forces clash, but a private chamber where personal choice confronts universal expectation. The space is beautiful but small, elegant but confining, comfortable but ultimately insufficient to contain the forces that collide within it. The presence of Lorien throughout the battle adds emotional weight to every moment of the conflict. His attempts to protect his brother reveal the depth of their bond, while also demonstrating the personal costs of Lothric's philosophical stance. The knight who once slew demons now uses his skills to protect someone who refuses to save the world, creating a moral complexity that transcends simple categories of heroism and villainy. The two-phase nature of the battle reflects the complexity of Lothric's situation and the difficulty of the choice he has made. In the first phase, Lorien serves as his brother's protector, using his martial skills to defend Lothric's right to make his own choice about his destiny. In the second phase, Lothric himself enters the battle, demonstrating the power he possesses and the cosmic significance of his refusal to use that power for its intended purpose. The magic that allows Lothric to resurrect his brother during the battle reveals both his power and his love. This is not necromancy in any conventional sense, but a demonstration of bonds that transcend death itself. The spell that brings Lorien back serves as proof that there are forces in the universe more powerful than cosmic obligation, relationships that matter more than universal duty. The soul of a Lord of Cinder that Lothric possesses creates a fundamental contradiction within the cosmic order. He has the power necessary to fulfill his role, but lacks the will to do so. His soul contains all the spiritual energy necessary to kindle the first flame, but it is bound by a will that refuses to permit that kindling. This contradiction makes him perhaps the most dangerous Lord of Cinder from the perspective of those who support the cosmic status quo. The dialogue that Lothric speaks during the battle reveals his understanding of the cosmic drama in which he is participating. His words are not the ravings of a madman or the selfish complaints of someone avoiding responsibility, but the reasoned arguments of someone who has studied the situation carefully and reached conclusions that differ from conventional wisdom. He speaks with the authority of someone who has access to information that others lack. The various magical effects that accompany Lothric's spells demonstrate his mastery of forces that go far beyond conventional sorcery. His ability to manipulate light and energy reveals understanding of cosmic principles that few humans have ever achieved. Yet he uses these abilities not to fulfill his cosmic role, but to defend his right to refuse that role, creating a paradox that challenges basic assumptions about power and responsibility. The defeat of Prince Lothric represents one of the most morally complex victories in Dark Souls 3. The Ashen One is not conquering a villain, but overcoming someone whose only crime is refusing to sacrifice himself for the greater good. The victory comes at the cost of forcing someone to abandon their deeply held philosophical convictions and accept a role they believe will ultimately cause more harm than good. The claiming of Lothric's Lord of Cindersoul completes the gathering necessary for the linking of the fire, but it also represents the triumph of cosmic obligation over individual choice. The prince who spent his life studying alternatives to the conventional solution is ultimately forced to become part of that solution, despite his understanding of its inadequacy. His defeat confirms that the cosmic order values compliance over wisdom, duty over understanding. The empty chamber that remains after Lothric's defeat serves as a monument to the cost of cosmic responsibility and the price of maintaining universal order. The books and magical apparatus that fill the space represent years of scholarly research that ultimately proved unable to provide an alternative to the solution. The prince rejected. His library becomes a memorial to the idea that knowledge and wisdom are not sufficient to overcome the momentum of cosmic tradition. As the Ashen One leaves Lothric's tower, they carry with them not just the prince's soul, but also the weight of his arguments and the validity of his concerns. His story raises questions about the nature of duty and the relationship between individual choice and universal need that have no easy answers. The victory over Lothric is necessary for the completion of the Ashen One's quest, but it comes at the cost of forcing participation in a cycle that may indeed be as futile and destructive as the prince believed. Chapter 8. The Soul of Cinder and the Final Choice. In the kiln of the First Flame, where the cosmic heart of the Age of Fire beats with ever-diminishing strength, the Ashen One finally comes face to face with the ultimate guardian of the dying flame. The Soul of Cinder stands as perhaps the most tragic and magnificent entity in all of Dark Souls lore. Not a single being, but the amalgamated essence of every hero who has ever linked the fire before. This creature represents the accumulated sacrifice of countless ages, a living monument to dedication that has transcended individual identity to become something both more and less than human. The arena where this final confrontation takes place carries the weight of cosmic history in every stone and flame. This is the same space where Lord Gwyn made his original sacrifice to kindle the first flame when it first began to fade. The architecture speaks to the importance of this location, with massive stone arches and carefully carved details that demonstrate the reverence with which this space has been treated across multiple ages. Yet the current state of decay and damage reveals the toll that repeated use has taken on even this most sacred of places. The first flame itself, visible as a barely flickering ember in the center of the arena, serves as a constant reminder of what is at stake in this final battle. This is not the roaring conflagration that once brought light and disparity to the world, but a dying fire that struggles to maintain even the minimum illumination necessary for its own visibility. The flame that once seemed eternal and inexhaustible has been reduced to something that might be extinguished by a strong wind or a moment's inattention. The Soul of Cinder emerges from this dying flame, not as a single coherent entity, but as a constantly shifting amalgamation of different fighting styles, magical abilities, and combat techniques. Each transformation represents a different hero who linked the fire in ages past, their individual techniques and preferences preserved within the collective consciousness that guards the flame. This constant shifting creates a sense of fighting not just one opponent, but the entire history of heroic sacrifice that has maintained the Age of Fire. The various forms that the Soul of Cinder assumes during battle tell the story of different ages and different approaches to the cosmic responsibility of linking the fire. The straight sword techniques speak to classic knightly traditions of honor and martial prowess. The curved sword styles suggest heroes who came from distant lands with different fighting traditions. The sorcery forms reveal the influence of scholarly heroes who combined intellectual understanding with magical power. Each transformation is both a tribute to fallen heroes and a demonstration of how their individual sacrifices have been absorbed into something larger and less personal. The magic that the Soul of Cinder wields represents a synthesis of every magical tradition that has ever been used in service of linking the fire. Sorceries that draw power from intelligence and learning combine with miracles that channel divine authority, while pyromancies that harness primal forces blend with hexes that manipulate darker energies. This magical diversity creates an opponent capable of challenging any approach the Ashen One might take, while also demonstrating the breadth of sacrifice that has gone into maintaining the flame. The most emotionally powerful transformation comes in the battle's final phase, when the Soul of Cinder assumes the fighting style and techniques of Lord Gwyn himself. This is not merely imitation, but genuine channeling of the First Lord of Cinder's own combat abilities, preserved across ages within the collective soul that guards the flame. The music that accompanies this phase reprises Gwyn's theme from the original Dark Souls, creating a sense of coming full circle that is both triumphant and melancholic. The weapons that the Soul of Cinder employs during different phases of the battle carry their own significance within the broader mythology of Dark Souls. Each weapon represents not just a tool of combat, but a symbol of the values and approaches that different heroes brought to their cosmic duty. The straight swords speak to traditions of honor and straightforward confrontation, while the curved blades suggest more fluid and adaptive approaches to conflict. The pyromancy that the Soul of Cinder demonstrates reaches levels of power and sophistication that surpass anything seen elsewhere in Dark Souls 3. These flames burn with colors and intensities that seem to violate natural law, creating effects that combine the destructive power of fire with properties that speak to deeper cosmic forces. The fire magic wielded here is not just practical sorcery, but a demonstration of the fundamental forces that govern reality itself. The arena's environmental effects during the battle create a sense of cosmic significance that transcends normal combat encounters. The flames that dance around the edges of the space respond to the intensity of the conflict, growing brighter during moments of particular drama, while dimming when the battle enters more contemplative phases. The very stones of the arena seem to resonate with the clash of forces, creating vibrations that can be felt as much as heard. The various NPCs who can be summoned to assist in this final battle represent different approaches to the cosmic crisis that the Soul of Cinder embodies. Each phantom brings their own fighting style and magical abilities, but more importantly, they bring their own understanding of what is at stake in this final confrontation. Some fight with the desperate fury of those who see this as the last chance to save their dying world, while others approach the battle with the calm resignation of those who understand that victory and defeat may be ultimately indistinguishable. The defeat of the Soul of Cinder does not feel like a conventional victory, but rather like the completion of a cosmic ritual that has been building throughout the entire game. The entity does not die in any traditional sense, but rather dissipates back into the first flame from which it emerged. This dissolution creates a sense that the battle was not really about conquest, but about proving worthiness to approach the flame and make the final choice about its fate. The moment of victory opens up the multiple endings that define the philosophical heart of Dark Souls 3. The choice between linking the fire, allowing it to die, or seeking alternative paths forward represents the culmination of all the themes and questions that the game has been exploring. Each possible ending reflects a different understanding of what the cosmic crisis requires and what the Ashen One's role should be in resolving it. The option to link the fire represents continuity with the tradition that has maintained the Age of Fire for so long. By choosing this path, the Ashen One accepts the same burden that countless heroes have carried before them, willingly sacrificing their individual existence to provide fuel for the cosmic order. This choice speaks to values of duty, sacrifice, and dedication to maintaining what exists, rather than risking change. The ending where the fire is allowed to die represents a fundamental break with tradition and an acceptance of change that may be both necessary and terrifying. By choosing this path, the Ashen One acknowledges that the Age of Fire has run its natural course and that attempts to prolong it artificially have caused more suffering than benefit. This choice speaks to values of acceptance, natural progression, and willingness to embrace uncertainty. The various alternative endings available through specific quest lines and character interactions represent attempts to find middle paths between these extremes. These endings suggest that the binary choice between linking the fire and letting it die may be a false dichotomy, that there might be other ways to address the cosmic crisis that avoid both the stagnation of eternal repetition and the chaos of uncontrolled change. The Lord of Hollows ending, available through Uria's questline, represents an attempt to claim the fire's power for humanity itself, rather than simply perpetuating or ending the current cosmic order. This choice suggests that the Age of Fire and the Age of Dark are both inadequate solutions, and that what is needed is a new age that synthesizes the best aspects of both, while avoiding their respective weaknesses. The ending where the fire is claimed by a Lord of Hollows speaks to themes of human empowerment and self-determination that run throughout the Dark Souls series, rather than serving as fuel for cosmic forces or accepting the rule of distant gods. This path suggests that humans can and should take control of their own destiny. Yet, this empowerment comes with its own costs and responsibilities that may prove as burdensome as the alternatives. The music that accompanies each ending reinforces the emotional and thematic significance of the choice being made. The compositions combine elements of triumph and melancholy, hope and resignation, in ways that capture the complex feelings that surround any decision with such far-reaching consequences. The music acknowledges that there are no perfect choices, only different forms of commitment to uncertain futures. The visual imagery that accompanies each ending tells its own story about the consequences of the choice being made. The linking of the fire creates a brief moment of renewed illumination that speaks to both hope and the temporary nature of any solution. The ending of the fire results in darkness that suggests both the end of one age and the potential beginning of another. The alternative endings create their own unique visual signatures that reflect the particular nature of the path being chosen. The various NPCs whose questlines intersect with these endings provide different perspectives on what each choice might mean for the world and its inhabitants. Their reactions to the Ashen One's decision reveal the personal stakes involved in cosmic choices, the way that universal decisions affect individual lives and relationships. These personal connections help ground the cosmic drama in human experience. The items and equipment that become available after completing different endings reflect the long-term consequences of the choice that has been made. New weapons, spells, and abilities speak to the changing nature of reality under different cosmic conditions. These gameplay elements serve as reminders that the ending chosen is not just a narrative conclusion, but a fundamental alteration of the world's basic operating principles. The new Game Plus mechanics that allow players to begin the journey again with their enhanced abilities create a sense of cyclical time that reinforces the thematic content of the endings themselves. The ability to make different choices in subsequent playthroughs suggests that the cosmic drama is not a linear progression, but a repeating cycle where different decisions might lead to different outcomes. The achievement systems and completion rewards associated with different endings encourage multiple playthroughs, while also providing meta commentary on the nature of choice and consequence. The game acknowledges that the decision between different endings is not one that can be made lightly or based on incomplete information, and that understanding the full implications of each choice requires experiencing their consequences firsthand. The community discussions and interpretations that surround the various endings demonstrate the ongoing relevance of the questions that Dark Souls 3 raises about power, responsibility, sacrifice, and change. Players continue to debate the merits of different choices and their implications for the world and its inhabitants, creating a form of collective interpretation that extends the game's exploration of these themes beyond the boundaries of individual playthroughs. The philosophical framework that underlies the ending system speaks to fundamental questions about the nature of existence and the role of conscious choice in shaping reality. Dark Souls 3 suggests that the most important decisions are often those with the most uncertain consequences, and that wisdom lies not in finding perfect solutions, but in accepting responsibility for imperfect choices. The legacy of the Soul of Cinder extends beyond its role as a final boss to encompass its significance as a symbol of accumulated sacrifice and collective memory. This entity represents the idea that individual actions can transcend their immediate context to become part of larger patterns of meaning and significance. The heroes who linked the fire in previous ages continue to exist within the Soul of Cinder, their individual sacrifices preserved and honored, even as their separate identities have been subsumed into something larger. As the Ashen One makes their final choice in the kiln of the first flame, they do so with the understanding that their decision will join the accumulated weight of all the decisions that have come before. Whether they choose to link the fire, let it die, or seek alternative paths forward, their choice becomes part of the ongoing story of how conscious beings respond to cosmic responsibility and the burden of shaping reality itself. Chapter 9. The Painted World of Ariandel. Hidden away from the dying world of Lothric, accessible only through mysterious means and ancient pacts, lies the painted world of Ariandel, a realm that exists simultaneously as artwork and reality, as sanctuary and prison, as preservation and decay. This extraordinary dimension represents one of the most unique locations in all of Dark Souls lore, a place where the normal rules of existence bend to accommodate different forms of life and different approaches to the cosmic crisis that afflicts the broader world. The painted world exists as a literal work of art, brought to life through magical means that transcend conventional understanding of the relationship between representation, created by an unknown artist of extraordinary power and vision. This realm was designed to serve as a sanctuary for those who found themselves unable or unwilling to exist within the constraints of normal reality. Yet, like so many well-intentioned creations in the Dark Souls universe, Ariandel has become something more complex and troubling than its creator originally intended. The landscape of Ariandel reflects both the artistic vision that brought it into being and the natural processes that have taken hold within its boundaries. Rolling hills covered in perpetual snow create a sense of peaceful isolation, while ancient trees and weathered ruins speak to the passage of time and the inevitability of change. Even within this protected realm, the beauty of the painted world is undeniable, but it is a beauty touched by melancholy and the constant presence of forces that threaten its continued existence. Sister Fried stands as the de facto ruler of Ariandel, a powerful cleric who has taken upon herself the responsibility of maintaining the painted world's stability and protecting its inhabitants from both external threats and internal decay. Her authority derives not from hereditary right or democratic mandate, but from the practical reality that she possesses the power and will necessary to maintain order in a realm where conventional governmental structures prove inadequate. The relationship between Fried and Father Ariandel, the being for whom the painted world is named, creates one of the most complex power dynamics in Dark Souls 3. Ariandel himself appears to be some form of hybrid entity, part human and part tree, whose essence has become inextricably linked to the painted world's continued existence. His connection to the realm goes beyond simple rulership to encompass a form of symbiosis where his well-being and the world's stability are inseparably connected. The rot that slowly spreads through the painted world represents one of the most insidious threats that the realm faces. This corruption is not the dramatic darkness or flame that characterizes threats in the main world, but a slow decay that seems to emerge from within the painted world itself. The rot speaks to the fundamental instability of any artificially created realm, the way that even the most carefully crafted sanctuaries carry within them the seeds of their own dissolution. Sister Fried's approach to dealing with this rot reveals her understanding of preservation through suppression, rather than allowing the natural cycle of decay and renewal that might cleanse the painted world. She has chosen to freeze both the rot and everything else in a state of perpetual winter. Her logic is that if nothing can change, then nothing can be lost. But this same logic ensures that nothing can grow or evolve either. The inhabitants of Ariandel represent a diverse collection of beings who have found refuge in this painted sanctuary. Corvians, crow-like humanoids with their own complex culture and traditions, have established communities throughout the snowy landscape. These beings possess intelligence and social organization that rivals human civilization, yet they exist in a state of constant vulnerability to forces beyond their control. The Corvian settlements, scattered throughout Ariandel, tell their own story of adaptation and survival in an unstable environment. These communities have developed unique architectural styles that blend practical necessity with aesthetic beauty, creating structures that serve both functional and artistic purposes. Yet many of these settlements show signs of abandonment or decline, suggesting that even this sanctuary cannot provide complete protection from the forces of change and decay. The relationship between the Corvians and the other inhabitants of Ariandel creates a complex social ecosystem where different species must coexist. Despite their different needs and capabilities, some Corvians serve in positions of authority or specialized function, while others exist as ordinary citizens trying to make lives for themselves in a world that seems increasingly unstable. Their presence adds depth to the painted world by demonstrating that sanctuary can be meaningful even when it is imperfect. The Millwood Knights, who also inhabit Ariandel, represent a different response to displacement and exile. These warriors, displaced from their original homeland by cosmic forces beyond their control, have established themselves as a military presence within the painted world. Their heavy armor and powerful weapons make them formidable opponents, but their presence also raises questions about the militarization of what was intended to be a peaceful sanctuary. The conflict between preservation and change that defines much of Ariandel's current crisis is embodied in the various locations that players can explore. The chapel, where Father Ariandel performs his strange rituals, represents the attempt to maintain stability through constant effort and vigilance. The library, where ancient knowledge is preserved, speaks to the value of maintaining connections to the past. Yet the rot-infested areas that spread throughout the world demonstrate the futility of trying to stop all change through force of will. The Painted World's library contains some of the most unique and valuable texts in the entire Dark Souls universe. These volumes document not just magical techniques and historical events, but also the philosophical and artistic theories that guided the creation of Painted Worlds. The knowledge contained within these books represents the accumulated wisdom of beings who attempted to create alternative realities, their successes and failures documented for future reference. The magical techniques that maintain the Painted World represent a synthesis of artistic vision and arcane power that goes beyond anything seen in the main world. The spells that hold the realm together draw on principles that combine aesthetic understanding with magical force, creating effects that are both beautiful and functional. Yet these same techniques require constant maintenance and renewal, making the Painted World dependent on the continued skill and dedication of its caretakers. The snow that perpetually falls throughout Ariandel serves multiple functions within the Painted World's ecosystem. On a practical level, it helps to slow the spread of rot by freezing affected areas before the corruption can spread further. On a symbolic level, it represents the preservation that Freed seeks to maintain. The way that freezing can halt change, but only at the cost of preventing growth and renewal. The various creatures that inhabit Ariandel, alongside the more intelligent species, create a complete ecosystem that demonstrates the Painted World's status as a fully realized reality, rather than merely an artistic representation. Wolves, insects, and other wildlife have found their own niches within this artificial environment, adapting to its unique conditions, while also contributing to its overall stability and complexity. The boss encounters within Ariandel tell the story of the Painted World's crisis through their mechanics and narrative context. Sister Freed represents the philosophy of preservation through suppression, fighting to maintain her frozen status quo against any force that might bring change. Father Ariandel embodies the cost of symbiosis between ruler and realm, his pain and suffering, reflecting the damage that the Painted World has sustained, despite Freedy's efforts at protection. The three-phase battle that culminates the Ariandel storyline creates one of the most complex and emotionally layered encounters in Dark Souls 3. The first phase pits players against Fried alone, representing the attempt to overcome the philosophy of stagnation through direct confrontation. The second phase introduces Father Ariandel as an ally of Fried, demonstrating how the painted world's own nature has been enlisted in service of preventing change. The third phase brings back Fried in a transformed state, showing how dedication to preservation can become its own form of corruption. The magic that Fried employs during these battles demonstrates both her power and her philosophical approach to the painted world's problems. Her ice-based sorceries can freeze opponents in place, preventing them from acting while also protecting them from further harm. Yet these same spells can also inflict massive damage, showing how the attempt to preserve through force can become indistinguishable from destruction. The scythe that serves as Frida's signature weapon carries its own symbolic weight within the context of her story. Traditionally, an implement of harvest and death, the scythe in her hands becomes a tool for preventing both harvesting and dying. She uses it not to reap what has grown, but to cut down anything that might threaten the eternal winter she seeks to maintain. The flame that Father Ariandel tends throughout the painted world represents his attempt to maintain the realm's existence through constant effort and sacrifice. This fire is not the cosmic first flame that governs the main world, but a more personal and intimate source of power that requires direct attention and care. The pain that Ariandel endures in maintaining this flame speaks to the personal cost of keeping artificial realities viable. The connection between the painted world and the broader Dark Souls universe becomes apparent through various details that link Ariandel to events and locations in the main world. References to previous painted worlds suggest that Ariandel is part of a larger tradition of artistic creation that has been used to address cosmic crises across multiple ages. The techniques and principles that govern painted worlds have evolved over time, but the fundamental purpose remains the same. The items and equipment that can be found throughout Ariandel tell their own story of the painted world's history and the various peoples who have sought refuge within its boundaries. Weapons and armor styles reflect different cultural traditions, while magical items demonstrate the synthesis of techniques that occurs when different magical traditions encounter each other in confined spaces. The environmental storytelling throughout Ariandel reinforces the themes of preservation, decay, and the tension between change and stagnation that define the painted world's current crisis. Every frozen pond speaks to Frida's philosophy of preventing change through force. Every area of spreading rot demonstrates the futility of trying to stop natural processes through suppression alone. Every abandoned settlement tells the story of communities that could not find sustainable ways to exist within the painted world's constraints. The music that accompanies exploration of Ariandel captures both the beauty of the painted world and the melancholy of its current situation. The compositions combine ethereal elements that speak to the realm's artistic origins with more ominous themes that reflect the growing crisis that threatens its continued existence. The musical themes that accompany boss battles escalate in intensity and complexity, reflecting the deepening conflict between preservation and change. The defeat of Sister Fried and Father Ariandel does not restore the painted world to some previous state of health, but rather opens up the possibility for new forms of change and growth. The end of Fried's frozen preservation allows natural processes to resume, but it also removes the protection that had been keeping the painted world stable. The victory is thus both liberation and catastrophe, freeing the realm from stagnation, while also exposing it to new forms of uncertainty. The flame that remains after Father Ariandel's defeat serves as both memorial and opportunity. This fire, no longer tended by its original keeper, represents the painted world's potential for renewal and transformation. Yet it also carries within it the uncertainty that comes with any major change, the possibility that new directions might lead to outcomes that are better or worse than what came before. The various NPCs who can be encountered throughout Ariandel provide different perspectives on the painted world's nature and its relationship to the broader cosmos. Some view it as a sanctuary that should be preserved at all costs, while others see it as a prison that prevents its inhabitants from engaging with the real world. These different viewpoints reflect the complexity of any attempt to create alternative realities as solutions to cosmic problems. The quest lines that intersect with the Ariandel storyline demonstrate how the painted world's fate connects to broader questions about the nature of reality and the relationship between art and existence. The choices that players make regarding the painted world's future affect not just its immediate inhabitants, but also the understanding of what role artistic creation can play in addressing cosmic crises. The legacy of Ariandel extends beyond its immediate narrative to influence the understanding of sanctuary and preservation throughout Dark Souls 3. The painted world serves as both positive and negative example of what can be accomplished through the attempt to create protected spaces, demonstrating both the potential benefits and the inevitable costs of trying to separate oneself from the broader flow of cosmic change. The philosophical questions raised by Ariandel's existence continue to resonate throughout the rest of Dark Souls 3, influencing how players understand the various endings and their implications for the future of the world. The painted world's example suggests that there may be alternatives to the binary choice between linking the fire and letting it die, but it also demonstrates that such alternatives come with their own unique challenges and costs. Chapter 10: The Ringed City and Humanity's Final Truth. At the very end of the world, where time itself has begun to collapse, and the accumulated weight of ages presses down upon the last remnants of reality, lies the Ringed City, humanity's oldest and most hidden settlement, where the greatest secrets of the Dark Souls universe wait to be revealed. This ancient metropolis, built at the edge of existence itself, represents both the culmination of human achievement and the final revelation of humanity's true nature and destiny within the cosmic order. The Ringed City was created as a prison, disguised as a gift, a grand gesture from the gods that simultaneously honored humanity and contained their most dangerous potential. When Lord Gwyn began to understand the true implications of humanity's dark soul heritage, he needed a solution that would acknowledge their significance while preventing them from realizing their full power. The Ringed City became that solution, a magnificent realm where humanity's elite could live in splendor while remaining safely isolated from the rest of the world. The architecture of the Ringed City reflects both divine generosity and divine fear. The structures are massive and beautiful, demonstrating architectural techniques that surpass even the greatest achievements of Anor Londo. Yet the city's layout also serves defensive purposes, with barriers and choke points that could contain its inhabitants if they ever attempted to leave or challenge the cosmic order that created their luxurious prison. The ring-shaped layout that gives the city its name serves multiple symbolic and practical functions. On one level, it represents the eternal nature of the bonds that connect the city's inhabitants to their role within the cosmic order. On another level, it creates a defensive structure that has no obvious weak points, making it nearly impossible to assault from outside, while also making it difficult to escape from within. The ring becomes both crown and shackle, honor and imprisonment. The inhabitants of the Ringed City represent the pinnacle of human development, under divine guidance and constraint. These people, known as the Ringed Knights, possess capabilities that far exceed those of ordinary humans, while remaining bound by obligations that prevent them from using their power to challenge the cosmic status quo. They serve as living examples of what humanity could become if properly guided and controlled. The Ringed Knights themselves embody the contradiction at the heart of the city's existence. They are extraordinarily powerful warriors, equipped with weapons and armor that incorporate both divine blessing and dark power. Their combat abilities surpass those of most gods, yet they remain dedicated to serving the cosmic order that created their city. They represent humanity perfected according to divine specifications, enhanced but also constrained by the same forces that elevated them. The weapons and equipment used by the Ringed Knights tell their own story of synthesis and contradiction. Their swords and spears combine divine metals with dark enchantments, creating armaments that can channel both light and shadow. Their armor protects them from conventional attacks, while also serving as a form of spiritual containment, preventing the dark power within them from manifesting in ways that might threaten the cosmic order. The various districts of the Ringed City demonstrate different aspects of this grand experiment in controlled human development. The residential areas show evidence of prosperity and cultural achievement that rivals anything accomplished by purely divine societies. The military quarters reveal training facilities and equipment that demonstrate the combat capabilities that the city's inhabitants have achieved. The scholarly sections contain libraries and laboratories that show the intellectual heights that humanity can reach when given access to cosmic knowledge. Yet beneath this surface prosperity lies evidence of the spiritual and psychological costs of life within such a constrained environment. The inhabitants of the Ringed City, for all their power and privilege, show signs of the same existential emptiness that affects those living under oppressive systems elsewhere in the Dark Souls universe. Their achievements, however impressive, feel hollow because they serve purposes imposed from outside rather than emerging from authentic human desires and ambitions. The Spear of the Church Covenant, that governs much of the Ringed City's spiritual life, represents one of the most sophisticated attempts at religious control ever implemented in the Dark Souls universe. This system allows worthy individuals to serve as temporary avatars of divine authority, channeling cosmic power while remaining bound by the obligations and constraints that define their role. The Covenant creates a form of controlled transcendence that enhances human capability while ensuring continued loyalty to the cosmic order. The ritual mechanics that govern the Spear of the Church demonstrate both the sophistication of divine manipulation and the genuine power that can be achieved through cooperation with cosmic forces. When activated, the Covenant transforms ordinary humans into beings capable of wielding divine authority. But this transformation is temporary and conditional. The enhanced power comes with built-in limitations that ensure it cannot be used to challenge the system that grants it. The various boss encounters within the Ringed City tell the story of humanity's relationship with divine authority through their mechanics and narrative context. The Demon Prince represents the consequences of attempting to gain power through corruption rather than cooperation. Half-Light represents the pinnacle of controlled human development, a being who has achieved near-divine status while remaining bound by cosmic obligation. Gale represents what happens when someone attempts to claim humanity's full heritage without regard for the consequences. The Demon Prince battle reveals the fate of those who attempted to gain power through alliance with chaotic forces rather than submission to divine authority. These creatures, once human, have been transformed by their contact with demonic power into something that retains human intelligence while possessing capabilities that transcend normal limitations. Yet their transformation has also cost them everything that made them authentically human, turning them into creatures that are powerful but empty. The fight against Half-Light, Spear of the Church, creates one of the most unique encounters in Dark Souls 3 by potentially pitting players against other players rather than scripted AI opponents. This mechanic reflects the theme of controlled transcendence that defines much of the Ringed City's approach to human development. Half-Light represents what humanity can become when it accepts divine guidance and limitation. Powerful, beautiful, but ultimately serving purposes that are not their own. The environmental storytelling throughout the Ringed City reveals the long-term consequences of living within such a controlled environment. The magnificent architecture begins to show signs of decay and abandonment as the inhabitants lose connection to authentic sources of meaning and purpose. The prosperity that once defined the city's character has become hollow and mechanical, maintained more through habit than genuine enthusiasm. The various areas of decay and corruption that can be found throughout the city demonstrate what happens when artificial systems begin to break down. The divine magic that maintains the city's stability requires constant renewal and attention, but the spiritual foundation that once supported such effort has gradually eroded. The result is a civilization that continues to function mechanically while losing the essential qualities that made it worth preserving. The desert that surrounds much of the Ringed City represents the encroachment of entropy and meaninglessness that threatens all artificial constructs. This wasteland is not the result of external attack or natural disaster, but the inevitable consequence of trying to maintain order through force rather than genuine understanding. The sand that blows through the city's streets carries with it the accumulated weight of ages and the promise of eventual dissolution. The various NPCs who can be encountered throughout the ringed city provide different perspectives on what it means to live within such a constrained environment. Some have found ways to maintain their humanity despite the limitations imposed upon them, while others have been so thoroughly shaped by their environment that they no longer remember what authentic human existence might look like. Their stories collectively paint a picture of the psychological costs of accepting safety and prosperity in exchange for freedom and authenticity. The items and equipment that can be found throughout the ringed city tell their own story of human achievement and divine manipulation. The craftsmanship evident in these objects demonstrates the heights that human skill can reach when properly supported and guided. Yet many of these same items also serve as tools of control, designed to enhance human capability while ensuring continued dependence on divine authority. The magic that governs much of the ringed city's operation represents a synthesis of human understanding and divine power that creates effects beyond what either could achieve independently. The spells and enchantments that maintain the city's stability draw on human creativity and divine authority in ways that demonstrate the potential for cooperation between different forms of consciousness. Yet this same magic also serves to reinforce the hierarchical relationship that keeps humanity in a subordinate position. The music that accompanies exploration of the ringed city captures both the grandeur of this ancient civilization and the melancholy of its constrained existence. The compositions combine themes of human achievement with elements that speak to the spiritual emptiness that lies beneath the surface: prosperity. The musical landscape creates a sense of beauty tinged with sadness, accomplishment, shadowed by the knowledge of what has been sacrificed to achieve it. The revelation of the Pygmy Lords within the depths of the ringed city provides crucial context for understanding humanity's true origins and potential. These ancient beings, descendants or aspects of the original furtive pygmy, represent humanity in its most concentrated and powerful form. Their presence within the city reveals that the ringed city serves not just as a prison for ordinary humans, but as a containment facility for beings whose power rivals that of the gods themselves. The state of decay and corruption that affects the Pygmy Lords demonstrates what happens when beings of such power are denied the opportunity to fulfill their authentic nature and purpose. These entities, who should be active forces shaping the course of cosmic development, have been reduced to passive guardians of their own prison. Their decline mirrors the broader theme of what happens when authentic power is suppressed in service of maintaining artificial stability. The dark soul that can be found within the deepest parts of the ringed city represents the ultimate prize and the ultimate danger that the city was designed to contain. This fragment of humanity's original heritage carries within it the potential to transform not just individual beings, but the entire cosmic order. Its presence within the city explains why the gods felt it necessary to create such an elaborate containment system, and why they invested so much effort in making that containment appear to be a blessing rather than a curse. The various attempts to claim or control the dark soul that are evident throughout the city's history demonstrate the ongoing tension between different factions and their understanding of what humanity's heritage should mean for the future of existence. Some sought to use the dark soul's power to enhance their own capabilities, while others attempted to destroy it entirely to prevent its disruptive influence. Still others tried to find ways to integrate its power into the existing cosmic order without fundamentally challenging that order's basic assumptions. The final revelation of what lies at the heart of the ringed city, the accumulated dark soul of humanity concentrated into physical form, provides the ultimate answer to questions that have been building throughout the entire Dark Souls series. This is not just another powerful artifact or cosmic force, but the essence of what humanity truly is and what it has the potential to become when freed from artificial constraints and divine manipulation. The guardian who protects this ultimate treasure Slave Nightingale represents both the heights of human dedication and the costs of pursuing absolute solutions to cosmic problems. His quest to gather every fragment of the dark soul and concentrate it into a single location demonstrates the kind of commitment that cosmic responsibility requires. But it also shows how such dedication can transform someone into something barely recognizable as human. The battle against Gael in the final arena of the series creates one of the most emotionally complex encounters in all of Dark Souls lore. This is not a fight between good and evil, but a confrontation between different visions of what humanity should become and what role it should play in the cosmic order. Gael represents the path of claiming humanity's full heritage regardless of consequences, while the player character represents the possibility of more measured and thoughtful approaches to cosmic responsibility. The wasteland where this final battle takes place represents the ultimate consequence of pursuing absolute solutions to cosmic problems. This is what remains when someone with unlimited dedication and unlimited power pursues a goal without regard for the costs or consequences. The beauty and horror of this desolate landscape speak to both the nobility of Gael's intentions and the devastation that can result from pursuing those intentions without wisdom or restraint. The music that accompanies this final confrontation combines themes from throughout the Dark Souls series, while introducing new elements that speak to the cosmic significance of what is taking place. The composition manages to be both elegiac and triumphant, capturing the sense that this battle represents both an ending and a beginning, both a culmination and a commencement. The victory over Gaia and the claiming of the concentrated Dark Soul creates the possibility for the most significant choice in the entire Dark Souls series. With this power in hand, the player character has the opportunity to fundamentally alter the cosmic order, to create new forms of existence that transcend the limitations of both the Age of Fire and the Age of Dark. Yet this same power also carries with it the potential for catastrophic destruction if used without proper understanding and restraint. The young painter who appears at the end of the Ringed City storyline represents hope for the future and the possibility that new forms of existence can be created that avoid the problems that have plagued previous cosmic orders. Her desire to paint a new world using the Dark Soul's power suggests that artistic creation and cosmic responsibility might be more closely connected than anyone had previously understood. The painted world that she envisions represents neither the artificial preservation that characterized Ariandel nor the uncontrolled change that defines the transition between cosmic ages. Instead, it suggests the possibility of conscious creation, guided by wisdom and constrained by understanding of consequences. This new world would be neither purely human nor purely divine, but something that transcends such categories entirely. As the Dark Souls series reaches its conclusion in the Ringed City, it offers not definitive answers, but deeper questions about the nature of existence, consciousness, and responsibility. The revelation of humanity's true heritage and potential creates new possibilities, while also acknowledging the dangers that come with any attempt to fundamentally alter the cosmic order. The choice of what to do with this knowledge and power remains open, a final test of wisdom and judgment that extends beyond the boundaries of the game itself into the realm of philosophy and meaning. Conclusion. The cycle's end and new beginnings. As our journey through the complete lore of Dark Souls 3 draws to its close, we find ourselves not at a definitive ending, but at a threshold between what has been and what might yet come to pass. The world we have explored together, from the dying embers of Lothric to the desolate wastes beyond the Ringed City, speaks to themes that transcend the boundaries of any single story or setting. In its meditation on endings and beginnings, on duty and choice, on the weight of legacy and the possibility of transformation, Dark Souls 3 offers us a mirror in which we might examine our own relationship with change, responsibility, and the meaning we choose to find in existence itself. The various Lords of Cinder, whose stories we have traced, represent different responses to the burden of cosmic responsibility, each reflecting a different aspect of how conscious beings might react when confronted with choices that extend far beyond their individual welfare. The Abyss Watchers, consumed by their dedication to duty, show us the dangers of allowing purpose to become more important than the people that purpose is meant to serve. Lothric demonstrates how authority can become corrupted when it loses connection to the values that originally justified it. Yhorm embodies the tragedy of good intentions pursued without adequate understanding of their likely consequences. Prince Lothric represents the possibility of rejecting inherited expectations in favor of personal conviction, regardless of the costs such rejection might entail. Together, these figures create a spectrum of possible relationships between individual will and cosmic obligation that speaks to fundamental questions about the nature of heroism, sacrifice, and moral responsibility. Dark Souls 3 does not offer simple answers to these questions, but rather invites us to consider the complexity of any situation where individual choices carry universal consequences. The Ashen One's journey through this dying world serves as more than just a vehicle for gameplay progression. It represents the process by which any conscious being might come to understand their place within larger patterns of meaning and responsibility. From the humble awakening in the Cemetery of Ash to the cosmic choices available in the Kiln of the First Flame, the Ashen One's development mirrors the way that experience and knowledge gradually expand our understanding of what is at stake in the decisions we make. The multiple endings available in Dark Souls 3 reflect the game's sophisticated understanding that there are rarely perfect solutions to complex problems, only different forms of commitment to uncertain futures. Whether the player chooses to link the fire, let it die, or pursue alternative paths, each decision represents a different understanding of what the cosmic crisis requires and what values should guide responses to existential challenges. The painted worlds and hidden realms that exist alongside the main narrative demonstrate that there may be possibilities beyond the binary choices that initially appear to define the cosmic situation. Ariandel shows us both the potential and the limitations of attempting to create protected spaces separate from the broader flow of change in time. The Ringed City reveals the costs of accepting safety and prosperity in exchange for freedom and authenticity. These alternative spaces suggest that the apparent choice between order and chaos, preservation and change, may be a false dichotomy that obscures other possibilities. The revelation of humanity's true heritage through the course of the game provides crucial context for understanding not just the immediate crisis, but the deeper patterns that have shaped the cosmic order across multiple ages. The dark soul that defines humanity's essential nature is neither purely positive nor purely negative, but rather a force that carries within it both creative and destructive potential. The choice of how to use this heritage, whether to embrace it fully, suppress it entirely, or find ways to integrate it with other cosmic forces, becomes the ultimate test of wisdom and moral judgment. The themes of decay and renewal that permeate every aspect of Dark Souls 3 speak to universal experiences of loss, change, and the challenge of finding meaning in the face of uncertainty. The dying world that serves as the game's setting is not just a backdrop for adventure, but a meditation on how conscious beings might respond when confronted with the end of everything they have known and valued. The grace and dignity with which some characters face this cosmic twilight serves as inspiration for how we might approach our own encounters with endings and transitions. The relationship between individual agency and larger patterns of fate that runs throughout the narrative raises important questions about the nature of choice and responsibility in a universe where cosmic forces seem to operate according to their own inexorable logic. Dark Souls 3 suggests that meaningful choice remains possible, even within such constraints, but it also acknowledges that the consequences of our choices often extend far beyond what we can predict or control. The emphasis on cycles and repetition that defines much of the game's mythology speaks to the way that similar patterns tend to recur across different times and contexts, while also suggesting that each iteration of these patterns offers opportunities for conscious beings to learn from previous mistakes and perhaps find better solutions to persistent problems. The various ages that have risen and fallen before the events of Dark Souls 3 serve as both warnings and sources of inspiration for those who must now decide what form the next age should take. The sophisticated treatment of power and corruption throughout the game demonstrates understanding that the greatest threats often come not from external enemies, but from the ways that noble purposes can be twisted when pursued without adequate wisdom or restraint. The various forms of corruption countered throughout the journey, from the noble decay of the Abyss Watchers, to the spiritual parasitism of Lothric, to the controlled transcendence of the Ringed City, show different ways that power can become separated from the values that originally justified it. The role of knowledge and understanding in the game's narrative suggests that wisdom is not just helpful, but essential for anyone who would take on cosmic responsibility. The various scholars, clerics, and researchers encountered throughout the journey demonstrate both the potential benefits and the dangerous limitations of purely intellectual approaches to existential challenges. True wisdom, the game suggests, requires not just knowledge but also emotional intelligence, moral clarity, and the humility to recognize the limits of one's own understanding. The emphasis on personal relationships and emotional connections throughout the game serves to ground its cosmic themes in recognizable human experience. The bonds between characters, whether the brotherhood of Lothric and Lorien, the friendship between Sigurd and Yorm, or the various alliances and conflicts that emerge from the player's choices, demonstrate that meaning often emerges from connection and care, rather than from abstract principles or cosmic purposes. The aesthetic approach that Dark Souls 3 takes to its themes of ending and transition creates a unique form of beauty that finds grace in decay and meaning in loss. The visual design of the game world, from the melancholic grandeur of Lothric's to the desolate beauty of the final wasteland, demonstrates that endings need not be simply tragic, but can also be sources of their own particular form of meaning and value. The music that accompanies the journey reinforces these themes through compositions that combine triumph and melancholy, hope and resignation, in ways that capture the complex emotions that surround any significant ending or transition. The musical landscape of Dark Souls 3 acknowledges that profound change always involves both loss and possibility, both grief for what is ending and anticipation for what might begin. The community aspect of Dark Souls 3, through its online features and shared experiences, creates a sense that the journey toward understanding cosmic responsibility is not one that must be undertaken alone. The messages, phantoms, and interactions that connect players across different worlds suggest that wisdom and support can be found in connection with others who face similar challenges and questions. The legacy of Dark Souls 3 within the broader context of the series demonstrates how sustained exploration of consistent themes can deepen understanding over time. Each game in the series has approached similar questions from different angles, and the accumulated insight from this extended exploration provides a richness of perspective that would be impossible to achieve within a single narrative. As we close this exploration of Dark Souls 3's complete lore, we are reminded that the most profound stories are those that do not seek to provide easy answers but rather to deepen our appreciation for important questions. The world of Dark Souls 3, for all its darkness and difficulty, ultimately affirms the value of consciousness, choice, and connection in the face of uncertainty and change. The cosmic drama that unfolds throughout the game serves as a metaphor for the challenges that all conscious beings face when they recognize their responsibility for shaping the future through their choices and actions. Whether we are linking fires or letting them die, preserving what exists or embracing what might come to be, we are all participants in the ongoing creation of meaning and value in a universe that offers no guarantees about the outcomes of our efforts. The silence that falls at the end of our journey is not empty but full of possibility, full of questions yet to be explored, full of choices yet to be made. In the space between one age and the next, between what has been and what might yet come to pass, we find the eternal present where all meaningful action takes place. And in that present, armed with the wisdom gained through our journey together, we can face whatever endings and beginnings await us with the courage, grace, and determination that the greatest heroes of Dark Souls 3 have shown us by their example. The embers may be dying, but new fires can always be kindled. The age may be ending, but new ages are always beginning. And in the space between ending and beginning, in the eternal moment where choice creates meaning, we find the true heart of what it means to be conscious, responsible, and alive in a universe that is always changing, always challenging us to become more than we were, always offering us the opportunity to shape what comes next through the choices we make and the values we choose to embody. Sweet dreams, fellow travelers. May you find in rest the peace that the world of Dark Souls 3 so rarely offers, and may you carry with you the wisdom gained through our shared journey into the depths of one of gaming's most profound and beautiful nightmares.